My daughter and her husband kicked me out and treated me like I was gone for 10 years. Then my brother posted a photo of me on a luxury yacht online just a few days later. My daughter texted me, "Dad, you are still alive. Can you sell the boat to help my family before I tell you how I destroyed their lives? Please like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you." My name is Cedric Thornton, and I am 68 years old. I am sitting on the aft deck of the Black Pearl, my $15 million custom yacht. The Florida sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of violent orange and bruised purple. To anyone walking along the private pier, I look like a hired hand, maybe a deck cleaner taking an unauthorized break. I am wearing my faded Lucky fishing hat, the one with the grease stain on the brim, and a flannel shirt that has seen better decades. I have a fishing rod in my hand that costs $20 at a pawn shop. But the cigar sitting in the heavy crystal ashtray next to me costs more than my son-in-law makes in a week. I prefer it this way. I prefer the silence. I prefer the disguise. For the last 10 years, I have built an empire from the shadows. I own Thornton Logistics. If you buy something that came on a ship from overseas, chances are my cranes lifted it, my trucks hauled it, and my warehouses stored it. I have 300 employees who call me Mr. Thornton with trembling respect. But to my family, I am just Cedric the broke dock worker. Cedric the burden. Cedric the man they threw away like yesterday's trash. The vibration of my phone against the teak table broke the silence. It was a harsh buzzing sound that seemed to cut through the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull. I ignored it at first. Only a few people have this number. My attorneys, my operations manager, and Percy, my younger brother, who is currently in the galley making us iced tea. The phone buzzed again and again. Persistent, urgent. I picked it up. The screen was bright in the dimming light. I squinted at the notification and my heart stopped. It actually skipped a beat, a physical reaction to a ghost I thought I had exorcised long ago. The name on the screen read Camila. My daughter. The girl who had blocked my number on Christmas Eve 10 years ago. The girl who had watched me walk into a snowstorm and turned off the porch light. I unlocked the phone, my thick fingers trembling slightly, not from age, but from a sudden surge of cold adrenaline. The message was displayed in a blue bubble. "Dad, you are still alive? Uncle Percy posted a photo of you on a boat. Can you sell it to help my family? We are in trouble." I read it twice. Then a third time. There was no hello. There was no "how have you been?" There was no "I am sorry for leaving you homeless." There was just a demand, a calculation. She saw a boat. She saw money. She saw me as a resource. I closed my eyes and suddenly I was not in Miami surrounded by luxury. I was back in Chicago. It was 10 years ago. The air smelled of ice and exhaust fumes. I was standing on the porch of the house I had helped them pay for. The wind was cutting through my thin coat, biting into my skin like 1,000 needles. Garrett, my son-in-law, stood in the doorway. He was wearing a cashmere sweater I had bought him for his birthday. He held a black, heavy-duty garbage bag in his hand. My life was in that bag. My clothes. My photo albums. The urn with my wife Viola's ashes. He threw the bag into the snowbank. It landed with a dull thud that echoed in my soul. "This house is for winners, Cedric," he had spat. His face twisted with a sneer that showed his perfect white teeth. "We are moving up in the world. We need space for successful people, not a retired dock worker who smells like fish and Old Spice. You are cramping our style, old man. Go find a shelter." I had looked past him. I looked for Camila. My little girl. The girl I had carried on my shoulders when she was too tired to walk. The girl whose tuition I had paid by working double shifts at the port until my back gave out. She stood in the warm, golden hallway. She was holding a mug of hot cocoa. She did not look at me. She looked at her shoes. "Camila, please," I had whispered, my voice cracking. "It is snowing. I have nowhere to go." She did not speak. She just reached out with her manicured hand and pulled the heavy oak door shut. The sound of the deadbolt clicking into place was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a heart breaking. I walked 2 miles to the bus station that night, dragging my garbage bag behind me. I slept on a bench, and I swore on Viola's ashes that I would never be weak again. The seagull's cry brought me back to the present. The humid Florida air filled my lungs, replacing the phantom chill of Chicago. Percy walked onto the deck. He is 5 years younger than me, but he looks older because he smiles more. He set a glass of iced tea down and saw my face. He saw the phone in my hand. He saw the darkness in my eyes. "It is her, isn't it?" Percy asked, his voice low. I nodded. She saw the photo you posted, the one of me fishing off the stern. Percy cursed under his breath. I am sorry, said. I thought I had blocked them all. I just wanted to brag on my big brother a little bit. He reached for the phone. Block her. Delete it. Do not let them back in. They are vultures, Cedric. They picked your bones clean once. They will do it again. I looked at the massive yacht around me. I looked at the skyline of the city where I owned buildings. I looked at my hands rough and scarred from 40 years of manual labor. They did not know who I was anymore. To them, I was still the broke old man. They thought this boat was a lucky break, a lottery ticket. They did not know it was the crown jewel of an empire built on blood and sweat. I looked at the message again. Can you sell it to help my family? The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its cruelty. I set down my fishing rod. 10 years, Percy, I said softly. 10 years I built this in silence. I worked until my knuckles bled. I invested when everyone else was selling. I bought the port that fired me. And now she wants me to sell my boat. Block her, Percy repeated. No, I said, and the word tasted like iron in my mouth. No. If I block her, they get away with it. They get to live their lives thinking they just cut off a dead limb. They need to know. They need to see. See what Percy asked, what they threw away. I typed a reply. My fingers felt heavy but steady. I channeled the old Cedric, the weak Cedric, the Cedric they remembered. Who is this? My eyes are bad and I cannot see the photo well. I hit send. The phone rang instantly. It was not even 5 seconds later. They were watching the phone like hawks. I put it on speaker so Percy could hear. He shook his head and looked away towards the ocean, refusing to witness the manipulation, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the lie. Daddy, came the voice. It was high-pitched, sweet, artificial. It was the voice she used when she wanted a new doll as a child. It was the voice she used when she crashed her first car and needed me to fix it. It was Camilla. Oh, Daddy, I am so glad I found you. We have missed you so much. Missed me. The lie was so big it hung in the air like a foul odor. Missed me for 10 years. Missed me while I was sleeping in a shelter. Missed me while I was starting my first delivery company with a broken van. I cleared my throat, making my voice sound weak and raspy. I hunched my shoulders even though no one could see me. I got into character. Camila. Is that you, baby girl? Yes, Daddy, it is me. I was crying on the other end. I could hear the fake sniffles. Listen, Daddy. Garrett and I have been looking for you everywhere. We were so worried. When Uncle Percy posted that picture, we cried tears of joy. But Daddy, we need to see you. We are driving down to Florida right now. We are already in the car. Already in the car. They must have packed the moment they saw the photo. They smelled money like sharks, smelled blood in the water. Why do you want to come? I asked, playing the confused old man. Because we love you, Daddy, she said, and because, well, we saw the boat. Is it yours, Daddy? Did you win the lottery? She could not help herself. She could not pretend for more than 30 seconds before asking about the money. It is complicated, I said, letting my voice tremble. It belongs to a friend, a very sick friend. He lets me stay on it. I heard a muffled sound on the other end. It sounded like Garrett swearing. Then Camilla's voice came back tighter this time. Well, Daddy, we are coming to get you. You cannot stay on a boat with a sick person. It is not safe. We are coming to take care of you. We need to talk about that boat, though. If your friend is sick, maybe he wants to sell it. We can help you manage that. We have big problems, Daddy. Garrett's business. Well, we need family right now. I looked at Percy. He made a cutting motion across his throat again. His eyes were pleading with me to end the call. But I smiled a cold, hard smile that did not reach my eyes. It was the smile I wore when I acquired a competitor who had tried to undercut me. Come then, I said. But do not come to the marina. They do not like visitors here. Where are you then? She asked, sharp and quick. I am staying at the old apartments on 4th Street near the tracks. Apartment 4B. Meet me there tomorrow evening. The apartments on 4th Street. It was a lie. I owned the building, but it was slated for demolition. It was a rat hole, a place for junkies and ghosts. It was exactly the kind of place they expected me to be. 4th Street, she repeated, and I could hear the sneer in her voice even through the phone. Okay, Daddy, we will be there. Do not move. Do not sign anything until we get there. We love you. The line went dead. I sat back in my Italian leather chair. I picked up my cigar and lit it. The smoke curled around me like a shield. You are playing a dangerous game, Cedric Percy said quietly. Why send them to the trap house? Why not just tell them to go to hell? Because Percy, I said watching the smoke rise, if I tell them to go to hell, they just leave. They go find another victim. I do not want them to leave. I want them to understand. Understand what? I stood up and walked to the railing, looking down at the dark water. The black pearl hummed beneath my feet, a beast waiting to be unleashed. I want them to understand that the man they threw out in the snow is dead. The man they are coming to rob does not exist. They are driving 12 hours to meet a ghost. And when they get here, I am going to show them exactly what happens when you cross Cedric Thornton. I turned to Percy. Call the security team. Tell them to prep the apartment on 4th Street, make it look bad, make it look desperate, break some furniture, and get me my old clothes, the ones I wore when I worked on the docks. Percy grinned slowly. You are going to verify if they changed? I shook my head. No, Percy. I know they haven't changed. I am going to verify how far they will go. I am going to give them a rope, and I am going to watch them hang themselves with it. Tomorrow, the play begins, and I have a feeling the final act is going to be spectacular. I left the Black Pearl an hour before sunset, leaving behind the scent of expensive teak oil and the gentle hum of $15 million worth of engines. My driver Thomas looked at me in the rearview mirror of the Rolls-Royce Phantom with a mixture of confusion and concern. He was used to driving me to board meetings at skyscrapers or galas at 5-star hotels. Today, however, I had given him a different address. Take me to 4th Street, Thomas, I said, adjusting the collar of my Italian silk shirt one last time. Drop me 2 blocks away. I do not want anyone seeing this car near the building. Thomas nodded silently. He knew better than to ask questions. I watched the city change through the tinted windows. The glass and steel towers of the financial district gave way to trendy cafes and renovated lofts, which then crumbled into the cracked pavement and boarded up windows of the neighborhood I used to call home. This was where I lived when Camila was a baby. This was where I learned that being poor is expensive because you pay for everything with your dignity. The car stopped. I stepped out into the humid air that smelled of exhaust and frying grease. I carried a small duffel bag. Inside it was my costume. I walked the 2 blocks to the tenement building I had purchased 6 months ago. I bought it to tear it down and build affordable housing, but for tonight, it was my stage. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken since the 90s. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes. It was a smell I had scrubbed off my skin 10 years ago, but it came rushing back like a bad memory. I unlocked apartment 4B. The security team had done their job perfectly. The apartment was a disaster. The linoleum floor was peeling in the corners, revealing the rot underneath. The beige walls were stained with water damage that looked like maps of countries that did not exist. There was a sofa that sagged in the middle like a broken spine and a table that wobbled if you breathed on it too hard. It was perfect. It was the exact level of misery my daughter would expect from me. I went into the bathroom. The mirror was cracked. I took off my jacket, my silk shirt, and my trousers. I folded them carefully and put them in the duffel bag. Then I reached in and pulled out the clothes from my past. A pair of work pants stained with oil and bleach, a gray t-shirt that was thinning at the collar, a flannel shirt with a missing button. I put them on. The fabric felt rough against my skin. It felt like failure. It felt like the man I used to be. Then came the hardest part. I looked at my wrist. My Patek Philippe watch caught the dim light of the bathroom bulb. It was a piece of engineering art worth $80,000. It was the only thing I wore that reminded me of my success. I unclasped it. The weight of it left my wrist and I felt naked. I wrapped it in a sock and shoved it deep into the bottom of the duffel bag, then hid the bag inside the oven. No one ever looks in the oven in a place like this. I sat on the broken sofa and waited. I stared at the door. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm. I was not afraid of them. I was afraid of what I would see in their eyes. I was afraid that 10 years of silence had killed whatever love was left. At 7 o'clock exactly, there was a knock. It was not a polite knock, it was a pounding, the sound of authority, the sound of a landlord coming to collect rent or a cop coming to serve a warrant. I stood up, hunching my shoulders, letting my posture collapse. I shuffled to the door and opened it. The hallway was dim, but Camilla and Garrett seemed to glow with artificial light. They were standing there like tourists in a zoo. Camilla was wearing a white dress that probably cost $500 but looked cheap because of the way she wore it like armor. She was clutching a designer handbag against her chest as if the air in the hallway might steal it. Garrett was behind her wearing a blue blazer and tight jeans, trying to look like a tech billionaire but failing. He looked like what he was, a gambler in a borrowed suit. They stared at me. I stared at them. 10 years. My daughter had lines around her eyes that I had not seen form. Her hair was lighter, dyed a blonde that did not suit her skin. She looked tired beneath the heavy makeup. "Dad," she said. Her voice was flat. "Camilla." I rasped. She did not hug me. She did not step forward. She just stood there and wrinkled her nose. Garrett stepped around her, pushing into the apartment without an invitation. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the peeling paint, the broken furniture, the water stains. He brought a hand up to his face, covering his nose and mouth. "Jesus," Cedric, Garrett said, his voice muffled by his hand. "It smells like a dead rat in here. Do you actually live here?" I lowered my head, playing the part. "It is home," I said. "It is cheap." Garrett laughed. A short barking sound. Cheap is one word for it. Disgusting is another. He walked over to the wobbling table and kicked one of the legs. The table shook. He kicked it again harder, testing it, treating my furniture like garbage. He turned to me, his eyes cold and assessing. So he said, ignoring any pleasantries, "Where is the boat?" "The boat?" I asked, blinking rapidly, acting confused. "Do not play stupid with me, old man," Garrett snapped. He pulled out his phone and shoved it in my face. The screen was bright, blinding me for a second. It was the photo Percy had posted. Me on the stern of the Black Pearl, smoking a cigar, looking like a king. "This boat," Garrett said, tapping the screen aggressively. "Uncle Percy said you were living the high life. He said you made it. We drove 12 hours thinking you had finally done something with your life. We get here and find you living in a sewer. So explain it to me, Cedric. Did you steal the boat? Are you house-sitting? Or are you holding out on us?" Camilla stepped into the room, then avoiding a stain on the floor. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and greed. "Dad," she said, and her voice dropped to that manipulative whisper I remembered from the phone call. "We just want to know the truth. That boat looks expensive. If it is yours, we can help you. You do not have to live like this. We can sell it and get you a nice apartment, a clean one." She looked around the room with valid disgust. I knew what she was thinking. She was thinking that selling the yacht would solve all their problems and leave enough left over to put me in a home where she would never have to visit. I walked over to the window and looked out at the brick wall of the next building. I let my shoulders shake a little, as if I were crying or laughing. They would not know the difference. "It is not mine," I said softly. The silence in the room was heavy. I could feel the air pressure drop as their expectations crashed to the floor. "What do you mean it is not yours?" Garrett demanded, stepping closer. His voice had lost the smooth charm and was now just sharp edges. "It belongs to a friend," I lied, turning to face them. "My friend Big Tony, he used to work on the docks with me. He won a settlement, a big injury lawsuit. He bought the boat. He lets me stay on it sometimes when he is in the hospital. He is very sick." I watched Garrett's face. It was a masterclass in disappointment. His jaw went slack. The light in his eyes died. He looked at Camilla and shook his head. "I told you," Garrett muttered. "I told you the old man was useless. A settlement. Of course. Just another charity case." Camilla looked at me, and for a second I saw a flash of anger. Real anger. Not because I was poor, but because I had dared to give her hope. "So you have nothing?" she asked. Her voice was ice. "You have nothing but this." I spread my hands, encompassing the rot and the ruin. "I have a roof," I said. "I have my pension." "Your pension," Garrett scoffed. "What is that? $1,200 a month? That wouldn't even cover the gas for my car." He looked around the room again, but this time his eyes were not looking for wealth. They were looking for scraps. He was looking at the television in the corner, an old boxy model I had bought at a thrift store for $10. He looked at the few books on the shelf. He looked at me. "We drove 12 hours for this," he said to the room. "Unbelievable." He turned to Camilla. "Let's go. This is a waste of time." "Wait," Camilla said. She was looking at me, studying me. Her eyes narrowed. "Dad, what about the friend? Big Tony. What about him?" I asked. Does he have family? Camilla asked. No, I said, just me. And he is sick, she pressed, very sick. I nodded. The doctors say he does not have long. Garrett stopped at the door. He turned around slowly. A new look entered his eyes. It was not the look of a son seeing his father. It was the look of a wolf spotting a wounded deer. He looked at Camilla, and a silent communication passed between them. They were predators recognizing an opportunity. Garrett smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It showed too many teeth. Well, he said, his voice suddenly smooth again like oil on water. That changes things, doesn't it? If he is your best friend and he has no family. Well, you might be coming into some responsibility, Cedric. He walked back into the room, stepping over the peeling linoleum as if it didn't bother him anymore. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. The grip was tight, painful. He was claiming me. You know, Cedric, he said, we got off on the wrong foot. It has been a long drive. We are stressed. Business has been complicated. But we are family, and family sticks together right. I looked at his hand on my shoulder. I wanted to brush it off. I wanted to break his fingers. But I stood still. Family. I repeated, my voice hollow. Yes, family, Garrett said. Listen, why don't we get out of this dump? Let's go get some dinner. On me. We need to catch up. We need to talk about your friend Tony and how we can help you manage his situation. He was inviting me to dinner, not because he wanted to see me, not because he missed me, but because he thought my imaginary dying friend might leave me a yacht. He was already planning how to steal an inheritance I did not even have yet. I looked at Camilla. She was smiling now too, a fake plastic smile that mirrored her husband's. Yes, Daddy, she said. Let's go to dinner. There is a nice place downtown, the Chop House. You remember how you used to love steak? I remembered. I remembered that I used to love steak when I could afford it, which was once a year on our anniversary. I would like that, I said, playing the grateful old fool. I am very hungry, good, Garrett said, squeezing my shoulder one last time before letting go. Go wash your face, Cedric. You have some dirt or something. And maybe change your shirt, if you have a better one. We don't want to scare the other customers. I watched them walk out into the hallway to wait for me. I heard Garrett whisper to Camilla as the door closed. Play along. If the friend dies, the old man gets the boat. We just have to wait him out. I stood in the silence of the ruined apartment. I felt cold, not from the drafty windows, but from the chill in my blood. They were monsters. I had known it, but seeing it was different. Seeing them pivot from disgust to predatory charm in the span of seconds was horrifying. I went back to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. The eyes staring back were hard. They were the eyes of a man who was about to go to war. I did not change my shirt. I wanted them to be embarrassed. I wanted them to sit next to me in a fancy restaurant and feel the shame of my poverty. I wanted to see if they could hold their masks in place while the world looked at their ragged father. I walked out of the apartment, leaving the Patek Philippe hidden in the oven. I joined them in the hallway. I am ready, I said. Lead the way, Garrett said, gesturing to the stairs. We walked down the 3 flights. I walked slowly, dragging my feet, forcing them to match my pace. I was the anchor around their necks, and tonight I was going to start pulling them down. They thought they were taking a lamb to the slaughter. They did not know they were walking into the lion's den. And dinner was going to be very expensive. The Chop House was one of those establishments that tried very hard to be elegant but missed the mark by a wide margin. It had velvet curtains that were slightly dusty, and waiters who introduced themselves by name but forgot to bring water. To Garrett, however, it was the height of sophistication. He walked in like he owned the building, strutting past the hostess stand without waiting to be seated. I shuffled behind him, keeping my head down, playing the role of the embarrassing relative. I saw the hostess look at my stained work pants and my flannel shirt with a mixture of pity and alarm. Garrett snapped his fingers at her. "We need a table," he commanded, "something private. And away from the kitchen. We have business to discuss." The hostess looked at his cheap blazer and then at me. She grabbed 3 menus and led us to a table right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. It was the worst seat in the house. Garrett scoffed but sat down anyway, adjusting his cuffs to show off a gold watch that I could tell from 5 feet away was a replica. I sat opposite them. The chair was comfortable. Too comfortable for a man who was supposed to be living in a rat-infested apartment. I hunched forward, making myself smaller. Garrett picked up the menu and did not even look at the prices. "I will have the tomahawk ribeye," he announced loudly enough for the next table to hear. "Medium rare. And add the lobster tail. I am celebrating." Camilla smiled at him. "I will have the cedar plank salmon," she said, "and a bottle of your best Chardonnay." Then Garrett looked at me. He did not hand me a menu. He just looked at the waiter and waved a dismissive hand. "The old man will have the house soup," he said, "and a side salad. His stomach is sensitive. He cannot handle rich food." I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. I could handle rich food perfectly fine. I had eaten a Wagyu steak on my yacht 2 nights ago that cost more than Garrett's car payment. But I said nothing. I just nodded and stared at the tablecloth. "And bring him a water," Garrett added. "Tap is fine." The waiter left and Garrett leaned back in his chair looking at me with eyes that were cold and calculating. He wrinkled his nose and waved his hand in front of his face. "You know, Cedric," he said, "you really need to do something about that smell. It is distinct. It smells like failure and mothballs. When we get this money sorted out, the first thing we are doing is burning those clothes." I gripped the edge of the table. The smell was actually just old fabric and the dust from the apartment, but to Garrett, poverty had a scent. It was the scent of weakness, and he despised it. So Cedric Garrett continued launching into his monologue. "Let me tell you what I do. I am a disruptor. I run a tech incubator called Vector Systems. We are revolutionizing the logistics supply chain. We use blockchain to track shipping containers. It is going to be huge. We are going to go public next year." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "I own the supply chain. My company, Thornton Logistics, moves 40% of the cargo on the eastern seaboard. I knew every major player in the industry. I knew every startup. I had never heard of Vector Systems. It was a lie, a fantasy he spun to feel important." "That sounds very complicated," I mumbled, playing the simpleton. "It is complicated," Garrett said, taking a sip of the wine the waiter had just poured. "That is why I make the big bucks. That is why I drive the big cars. You would not understand the level of finance I operate at Cedric. It is a different world than stacking crates on a dock." I nodded slowly. "You are right," I said. "I do not understand." The food arrived. Garrett tore into his steak like a starving animal. Grease coated his chin. He did not offer me a bite. I ate my lukewarm soup and watched them. They ate with a desperation that betrayed them. They ate like people who did not know when their next luxury meal would come. They drank the wine too fast. They were loud. They were rude to the waiter. They were everything I despised. When the check came, Garrett snatched the black folder before the waiter could even set it down. "I have got this," he announced loudly. "It is the least I can do." He pulled out a sleek metal credit card. It was heavy. It looked impressive. He dropped it onto the tray with a clatter. "Put it on the corporate account," he told the waiter with a wink. The waiter nodded and walked away. Garrett leaned back, picking his teeth with a fingernail. "See, Cedric," he said, "this is how you take care of family. You provide. You do not become a burden." I waited. I knew what was coming. I had run a background check on him while I was in the bathroom at the apartment. His credit score was in the double digits. His accounts were overdrawn. The waiter returned. He was not smiling anymore. He walked up to the table and held the folder out to Garrett. "I am sorry, sir," the waiter said, his voice loud in the quiet restaurant. The card was declined. Garrett froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and sweaty. "That is impossible," he snapped, snatching the card back. "Run it again. It is a platinum card. It has no limit." "I ran it 3 times, sir," the waiter said. "It says declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Garrett fumbled in his wallet. He pulled out another card. "Try this one." The waiter took it and walked away. He was back in 30 seconds. "Declined, sir." Garrett slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. It is the bank. They always put a fraud hold on my accounts when I make big transactions because I move so much money around. It is a security measure." Camilla looked at him, her eyes wide with panic. "Garrett," she hissed, "do you have cash?" "I do not carry cash," Garrett whispered back angrily. "Cash is for poor people." The waiter was still standing there. He crossed his arms. "Sir, the bill is $300. We need payment." Garrett looked around the restaurant. People were staring. The couple at the next table was whispering. The facade was cracking. The millionaire disruptor could not pay for his steak. I I have to call my banker, Garrett stammered, standing up. I have to sort this out. Sit down, I said. My voice was quiet, but it had an edge of steel that made Garrett drop back into his chair. I reached into the pocket of my stained work pants. I pulled out a roll of bills. It was a thick wad of 1s, 5s, and 20s held together by a rubber band. It looked like drug money or tips from a jar. It was dirty. It was crumpled. I peeled off the rubber band. My hands shook a little, not from age, but from the sheer pathetic nature of the moment. I started counting out the bills onto the white tablecloth. 1, 2, 3. Garrett stared at the money. He looked like he wanted to vomit. He looked like he wanted to grab it. Dad, Camilla said, her voice small. You do not have to do that. I kept counting. 20, 40, 60. I smoothed out the wrinkles in the bills. It took a long time. It was agonizing. I put the last 20 down. $320, including the tip he did not deserve. I pushed the pile of cash toward the waiter. I am sorry about the trouble, son, I said. My son-in-law is having technical difficulties. The waiter took the money. He looked at me with respect and at Garrett with disgust. Thank you, sir, he said to me. Then he walked away. Garrett stared at the empty table. He did not say thank you. He did not apologize. He just reached out and grabbed the wine bottle, pouring the last few drops into his glass. I will Venmo you, Garrett muttered, once the bank clears the hold. I did not answer. I knew I would never see that money again. We walked out of the restaurant. The air outside was cool. Garrett lit a cigarette, his hands shaking. He paced back and forth on the sidewalk for a moment, then stopped in front of me. He loomed over me, trying to regain his height, trying to regain his power. Look, Cedric, he said. That was embarrassing. But it proves my point. The banking system is broken. That is why my company is so important. But we need capital. We need a bridge loan to get to the IPO. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of stale wine and desperation. We need $2 million, Cedric. I blinked, playing the part. 2 million, I repeated as if the number was too big to comprehend. Yes, 2 million, Garrett said. And you are going to get it for us. Me, I asked. I just paid for dinner with my savings. I do not have $2 million. No, Garrett said, his voice dropping to a growl. But your friend Big Tony does. Or his boat does. He looked around to make sure no one was listening, then grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep. Listen to me, old man. You are going to go back to that boat. You are going to talk to Tony. You are going to tell him that your family is in trouble. You are going to tell him that you need a loan. Or better yet, you are going to convince him to sell the boat and give you the money. Why would he do that? I asked, pulling my arm away. Because he is dying, Garrett hissed. What does a dying man need with a boat? He can't take it with him. But we are the future. We are young. We have potential. It is a waste for that asset to sit there rotting. It is your duty, Cedric. You owe us. I owe you, I asked. Yes, you owe us. We took you in 10 years ago. We let you live in our house. And now we came all this way to save you from that dump you are living in. We are the only family you have. If you do not help us, you are going to die alone in that apartment. Do you understand? He was rewriting history. He was twisting the knife. He truly believed that I was his property. He believed that my connections, whatever they might be, belonged to him by right. Camilla stepped up beside him. She put a hand on my arm. Daddy, please, she said. We are desperate. If we do not get this money, bad things will happen. People are looking for Garrett. Dangerous people. You have to help us. Ask Tony. Please. I looked at them, the gambler and the enabler. They were willing to strip a dying man of his last comfort to save themselves. They were willing to use me as the weapon. I looked down at my shoes. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump. Okay, I whispered. I will ask him. I will go to the boat tomorrow. Garrett let out a breath he had been holding. Good, good. That is the right decision, Cedric. You are finally stepping up. He clapped me on the back again hard. We will drive you there in the morning, Garrett said. We will wait in the car. You go in, you get the money or the title, and you come out. Do not screw this up. I looked up at him. I will do my best, I said. Excellent, Garrett said. Now let's get you back to your apartment. We need to get some sleep at our hotel. We have a big day tomorrow. They dropped me off 2 blocks from the tenement building because Garrett did not want to risk his tires on the broken glass near the entrance. I watched their rental car drive away. I stood in the dark street and let the mask fall. I straightened my back. I wiped the look of confusion from my face. They wanted $2 million. They wanted me to rob my friend. They wanted to bleed me dry. I took out my phone and dialed Percy. "Is everything ready?" I asked. "Everything is set," Percy replied. "The boat is prepped. The crew is briefed. And I have the security footage from the restaurant. You should see his face when the card declined. It is priceless." "Save it," I said. "We will need it for the highlight reel." I walked back to the apartment to retrieve my Patek Philippe from the oven. Tomorrow I was going to take them to the boat. I was going to let them step onto my territory. And then I was going to introduce them to the real owner of the Black Pearl. Garrett wanted a bridge loan. I was going to give him a bridge to nowhere. The next morning started with a pounding on my door that shook the dust off the doorframe. I opened it to find Garrett and Camilla standing in the hallway vibrating with a manic energy. They looked like addicts waiting for a fix. Garrett was wearing sunglasses indoors, likely to hide the bags under his eyes from a sleepless night of calculating his imaginary millions. Camilla was clutching a large manila envelope to her chest. "We are ready," Garrett said, stepping past me into the apartment without asking. "The car is downstairs. Let's go see this friend of yours. Let's go get the boat." I closed the door slowly. I walked to the window and looked out at the brick wall. I did not turn around. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. He said no. I said softly. The silence behind me shattered. "What do you mean he said no?" Garrett barked, his voice cracking. "You said you would ask him." "I did ask him," I lied, turning to face them. "I called him last night. Big Tony is stubborn. He says he wants to die on that boat. He says it is the only thing he has left. He will not sell it, and he definitely won't loan $2 million to strangers." Garrett made a sound like a wounded animal. He kicked the sofa, sending a cloud of dust into the air. "This is useless," he screamed. "I told you this was a waste of time, Camilla. Your father is useless. He has always been useless. We are dead. Do you hear me? Ooh, we are dead." He paced the small room, running his hands through his hair. I watched him. I felt nothing. No pity, no fear, just a cold curiosity about how far they would go. Then Camilla stepped forward. She pushed Garrett aside. Her face was pale, but her eyes were focused. She looked at me with an intensity that reminded me of her mother. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, "you have to try again. You do not understand. It is not just about Garrett's business. It is not just about debt." She took a breath and the tears started. They spilled over her lashes instantly. "It is about Leo," she whispered. "Leo?" I asked. "Your grandson," she sobbed. "You have a grandson, Dad. His name is Leo. He is 7 years old." She pulled a photo out of the envelope and shoved it into my hands. I looked down. A boy looked back at me. He had my nose. He had Viola's chin. He was smiling, sitting on a swing set. A wave of emotion hit me so hard I almost lost my footing. A grandson. I had a grandson. A piece of me was out there in the world, and I did not know him. "He is sick, Dad," Camilla cried, sinking onto the dirty floor at my feet. "He is so sick. He has a heart defect, hypoplastic left heart syndrome. The doctors here say there is nothing they can do. They say he needs a transplant, but he is too far down the list." She grabbed my hand, squeezing it with desperate strength. "There is a specialist in Switzerland," she continued, the words tumbling out of her mouth. "Dr. Kruger. He has an experimental procedure. He can save him, Dad. He can save my baby. But it costs $2 million. Cash. Up front. Insurance won't cover it." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "That is why we need the money, Dad. Not for us. Not for the business. For Leo. Garrett got into debt trying to pay for the initial treatments. We are drowning. If we do not get that money, Leo is going to die." I looked at Garrett. He had stopped pacing. He was watching me, his face a mask of tragic sorrow. He nodded slowly. "It is true," Cedric Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "I did not want to tell you. I did not want to burden you. But we are desperate. I borrowed money from bad people to buy medicine for the boy. Now they want it back and the boy still needs surgery. If we don't pay, they kill me. If we don't pay the surgeon, the boy dies." I looked back at the photo. My grandson, my blood, dying. The ice around my heart cracked. I felt a physical pain in my chest. I could hate my daughter for kicking me out. I could hate her husband for being a leech. But a child. An innocent child. If there was even a 1% chance this was true, I could not stand by. I had millions. I could write a check today and save him. I could fly him to Switzerland on my private jet. But I was not the same man I was 10 years ago. I had learned to be cautious. "Do you have proof?" I asked, my voice rough. Camila nodded frantically. Yes. Yes, of course. She opened the manila envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. She handed them to me. I took them, my hands shaking slightly. They looked official. There was a letterhead from a Zurich medical institute. There were diagrams of a heart. There were invoices with staggering numbers. There was a letter signed by a Dr. Kruger stating that immediate payment was required to secure a surgical slot for Leo Thornton Black. I read the words. Patient is in critical condition. Survival rate without intervention is less than 5%. I felt tears prick my own eyes. My grandson was dying and I was playing games in a slum apartment. Shame washed over me. How could I question this? How could a mother lie about her own child's death? It was unthinkable. It was a line no human being would cross. I looked at Camila. She was weeping quietly now, her head bowed. Garrett had his hand on her shoulder, playing the supportive father. I did not know, I stammered. "We didn't want you to know," Camila whispered. "We wanted to handle it. But we failed, Dad. We failed him. You are our last hope. Please, ask Tony, beg him, sell the boat, steal it. I don't care. Just save my son." I took a deep breath. I looked at the photo of Leo one more time. He looked so happy, so full of life. "Okay," I said. "Okay, stop crying." I wiped my eyes with the back of my rough hand. "I will get the money," I said firmly. Camila's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide. "Really, Dad?" "Yes," I said. "Big Tony owes me. I saved his life once on the docks. If I tell him it is for a child, for my blood, he will do it. He will sell the boat, or he will give me the cash." Garrett let out a long breath. "Thank God," he muttered. "Thank God." "When can you do it?" Camila asked. "When can we get the money?" "Tonight," I said. "I will go to him today. I need to explain it to him alone. He has a temper. But if I show him these papers, he will understand." I held up the medical records. "You keep those," Camila said quickly. "Show him. Show him everything." I nodded, putting the papers in the pocket of my work pants. "Go back to your hotel," I said. "I need to go to the marina. I will call you tonight." "Are you sure you don't want us to drive you?" Garrett asked. "No," I said. "Tony hates strangers. If he sees you, he might change his mind. Let me handle this." They hesitated, but the promise of $2 million was too strong. They stood up. Camila hugged me. It was the first time she had hugged me in 10 years. It felt desperate. It felt real. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. "You are saving our family." They left the apartment. I heard their footsteps fading down the stairs. I heard the front door of the building close. I stood alone in the center of the room, clutching the photo of the boy I had never met. My heart was racing. I wanted to run out the door. I wanted to go to the bank. I wanted to save him. But the businessman in me, the man who had survived sharks and cutthroats for a decade, held me back. Trust but verify. That was the motto that had made me rich. I took out my burner phone, the one I used for the charade, and threw it on the couch. Then I went to the oven and retrieved my secure satellite phone from the duffel bag. I dialed a number that connected directly to the head of my private security team, a former Mossad agent named Vance. "Vance," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I need a rush job. Top priority." "Go ahead, Mr. Thornton." Vance answered instantly. "My daughter Camila Black. She has a son, Leo, 7 years old. I need to know where he is. I need to know his health status. I have papers here from a Zurich medical institute claiming he has a heart defect and needs surgery. I read him the doctor's name and the case number from the papers. Find out if this is real, Vance. Find out if my grandson is dying. I will wait." I sat down on the sagging sofa. I put the phone on the table. I stared at the photo of Leo. Please, I prayed, please let him be sick. It was a twisted prayer. I was praying for my grandson to be ill because the alternative was too horrific to contemplate. I was praying that my daughter was a desperate mother, not a monster. The minutes ticked by. 10, 20, an hour. I paced the small room. I smoked a cigar, filling the small space with blue smoke. I looked at the peeling paint. I thought about the 10 years I had lost. I thought about the hug Camilla had given me. Was it real? Could a person fake that kind of desperation? 2 hours later, the phone rang. I picked it up before the first ring finished. "Report," I said. Mr. Thornton Vance's voice was flat, professional, devoid of emotion. "That is how I knew it was bad." "Tell me," I said, bracing myself. "We ran the check," Vance said. "We contacted the Zurich Medical Institute. Dr. Kruger died 3 years ago. The letterhead is outdated. The case number does not exist in their system." I closed my eyes. The papers were fake. "And the boy?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Is he sick?" "No, sir," Vance said. "We located Leo Black. He is currently at a premium sleepaway soccer camp in Vermont. We spoke to the camp director. He is perfectly healthy. He scored 2 goals in a match yesterday. We have a photo of him from this morning posted on the camp's website. He is fine, Mr. Thornton. He is fine. My grandson was playing soccer. He was healthy. He was happy. And his mother was using his imaginary death to swindle her father." I felt something break inside me. It was not a loud break. It was a quiet, snapping sound, like a dry twig in winter. The last thread of hope, the last connection to the daughter I thought I knew, was severed. "They lied," I whispered. "They used a child. They used my grandson." "Yes, sir," Vance said. "It appears they downloaded the medical template from a forum for creative writing. It is a clumsily forged document." "Thank you, Vance," I said. "Keep watching them." I hung up the phone. I sat in silence for a long time. The sun moved across the floor, highlighting the dirt and the grime. I looked at the photo of Leo again. I looked at his smile. They were willing to kill him in my mind to get my money. They were willing to put me through the torture of thinking my blood was dying just to pay off a gambling debt. I stood up. I walked to the bathroom. I took the photo of Leo and tucked it carefully into my wallet next to the picture of my late wife. I would save him. I would save Leo. But not with surgery. I would save him from his parents. I walked back into the living room. I picked up the fake medical papers. I lit a match and held it to the corner of the page. I watched the fire curl the paper, turning the lies into ash. I dropped the burning paper into the metal sink and watched it turn to black dust. Garrett and Camilla wanted a show. They wanted a savior. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Camilla. I spoke to Tony. He agreed. He is signing the papers tonight. Come to the marina tomorrow. We are going to have a party. A farewell party for the boat. And a celebration for Leo. I hit send. The tears were gone. The hesitation was gone. There was only ice left in my veins. They had crossed the line. They had brought an innocent child into their con. And now I was going to burn their world to the ground. The truth about a man is not found in what he says at a dinner party or the car he drives, but in his bank statements. I sat at the wobbly table in the apartment on 4th Street, the air thick with the smell of old dust and my own cigar smoke. My laptop was open, a glowing beacon in the gloom. Vance had sent over the full financial dossier on my son-in-law Garrett. I had expected bad news. I had expected credit card debt, maybe a second mortgage. What I found was a catastrophe. Garrett was not a tech entrepreneur. He was not a disruptor. He was a degenerate gambler. The report was a litany of failures. Vector Systems, the company he bragged about, was nothing more than a shell corporation registered to a P.O. box in Delaware with 0 assets and 0 revenue. It was a front he used to launder the loans he took out to pay his gambling debts. And the debts were staggering. I scrolled through the pages, my eyes widening. 300,000 lost in Vegas over a single weekend. 50,000 dropped on sports betting apps in a month. But those were the small numbers. The real horror was at the bottom of the report. A loan from a private equity firm called Sterling Capital. I knew Sterling Capital. Everyone in the underworld knew Sterling Capital. It was run by Marcus Sterling, a man who wore 3-piece suits and had a smile like a shark. He was a loan shark who had gentrified his image, but his methods were as brutal as ever. Garrett owed Sterling $3 million. I sat back the leather of my old chair, creaking. $3 million. That was why he was so desperate. That was why he needed the boat. That was why he had invented a dying grandson. He was not trying to expand a business. He was trying to keep his kneecaps. He was trying to stay alive. It made sense now. The sweat on his brow at dinner, the panic when the card declined. He was a man standing on a trap door with the rope already around his neck, and he was willing to sacrifice anyone, his wife, his son, his father-in-law, to keep that door from opening. I felt a surge of cold anger. He had dragged my daughter into this. He had dragged an innocent child into this. Camila was complicit. Yes, she was greedy and cruel, but she was also likely terrified. She was living with a man who was drowning, and he was pulling her down with him. I closed the laptop and hid it under the loose floorboard in the bedroom. I had seen enough. I knew the enemy. He was weak. He was scared. And scared men are dangerous. I did not have to wait long to see just how dangerous. It was past midnight when I heard the heavy footsteps on the stairs. They were uneven stumbling, drunk footsteps, or maybe just desperate ones. The door to the apartment did not just open this time. It exploded inward. The cheap lock gave way with a splintering crack of dry wood. Garrett stood in the doorway. He was alone. He was not wearing his blazer anymore. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his eyes were wild, bloodshot, and frantic. He smelled of whiskey and fear. He stepped into the room, kicking the door shut behind him. He looked around, spotting me sitting in the corner. "You!" he snarled. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He grabbed the lamp from the table, the only source of light, and threw it against the wall. The bulb shattered, plunging us into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the street lights filtering through the grime of the window. "Stop playing games!" Cedric Garrett screamed. He was not the smooth talker from the restaurant anymore. The mask was gone. This was the real Garrett, the cornered animal. I stood up slowly, holding my hands up in a gesture of surrender, playing the frightened old man. "Garrett, what is wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What is wrong?" Garrett laughed, a high-pitched, manic sound. "What is wrong is that I am out of time. I do not have time for your friend Tony to make up his mind. I do not have time for parties. I need that boat. I need the money. Now." He lunged at me. He grabbed the front of my flannel shirt, bunching the fabric in his fists. He slammed me back against the wall. My head hit the plaster with a dull thud. It hurt, but I had taken harder hits on the docks. I let my body go limp, letting him think he had the power. "You are going to sign a paper," Garrett hissed, his face inches from mine. Spittle flew from his lips. "You are going to sign a power of attorney. You are going to give me the rights to sell that boat. I know Tony is not real, or if he is, you have influence over him. You are going to make it happen. Tonight." He was shaking me now, rattling my teeth. "I cannot," I wheezed. "It is not my boat. Tony." "Shut up about Tony." Garrett screamed. He let go of my shirt with one hand and reached into his back pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper and a pen. "Sign this. It says you are acting as Tony's agent. It says you transfer all rights to me. Sign it, or I swear to God, Cedric, I will beat you until you cannot remember your own name." I looked at the paper. It was gibberish, legally speaking. It would never hold up in court. But that did not matter. What mattered was the violence in his eyes. He was ready to hurt me. He was ready to kill me if he thought it would get him the money. I looked at him. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead. I saw the terror behind the rage. Sterling must have called him. The deadline was up. I need my glasses," I stammered. "I cannot see." "You do not need to see," Garrett yelled, shoving the pen into my hand. "Just sign your name. Sign it." He slammed me against the wall again, harder this time. Pain flared in my shoulder. This had gone far enough. I needed him out. I needed him to think he had won, or at least that he had broken me, but I could not sign that paper. Not yet. I dropped the pen. I let my eyes roll back in my head. I gasped, loud and wet, a sound like a dying engine. I clutched my chest with both hands, crumpling my shirt over my heart. "Garrett," I gasped, sliding down the wall. My heart. I cannot breathe. I fell to the floor, curling into a ball. I let out a low moan. It was a performance I had seen 100 times in movies, but in the dim light with the adrenaline pumping, it looked real enough. Garrett froze. He took a step back, the paper still in his hand. He looked down at me, his eyes wide with panic. "Get up," he said, but his voice wavered. "Stop faking it, old man. Get up." I did not move. I just wheezed, holding my breath until my face turned red. I let my body convulse once, then went still. Garrett cursed. He looked at the door, then back at me. He did not check for a pulse. He did not call 911. He did exactly what I knew he would do. He panicked. If I died here right now, he would get nothing. He would be investigating for murder or manslaughter. He needed me alive to get the money. He backed away towards the door. "You are fine," he stammered, trying to convince himself. "You are just having a spell. You are weak." He put his hand on the doorknob. He looked at me one last time, a heap of old clothes on the dirty floor. His fear turned into cruelty. "Listen to me, Cedric," he said, his voice shaking but venomous. "You better not die. You hear me? Because if you do not sign that paper tomorrow, I am done playing nice." He opened the door. "If you survive this night," he spat, "I am putting you in a home. The cheapest, nastiest state-run facility I can find. A place where they tie you to the bed and feed you through a tube. They will declare you incompetent, and I will take everything anyway. So do us both a favor and sign the paper." He slammed the door, leaving me in the darkness. I lay on the floor for a full minute, listening to his footsteps retreat, listening to the engine of his car roar to life and speed away. Then I sat up. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stale air. I rubbed my shoulder where he had slammed me against the wall. He was going to put me in a home. That was his plan B. If he could not bully me, he would erase me. He would declare me insane, lock me away, and pick my bones clean. I stood up and brushed the dust off my pants. I picked up the broken lamp and set it on the table. He wanted to play the medical game. He wanted to use doctors and diagnoses as weapons. I walked to the window and watched the empty street. "Fine, Garrett," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to declare me incompetent. You want to forge medical records. Let's see how that works out for you." I picked up my secure phone and dialed Vance. "Get the legal team ready," I said, "and tell them to find a doctor. A dirty one. The kind Garrett would hire. We are going to set a trap." Garrett had threatened me with a cage. I was going to build one for him instead, and unlike the one he planned for me, mine would have iron bars and a prison guard. I sat in the darkness of the 4th Street apartment with only the blue glow of my laptop screen illuminating the peeling paint on the walls. The air was thick with the smell of my own stale cigar smoke and the metallic tang of adrenaline. On the screen, a black and white video feed flickered to life. Vance, my head of security, had been busy. While Garrett and Camilla were out pretending to be concerned children, he had sent a team into their hotel suite. They had placed cameras in the smoke detector and the television console. The audio was crystal clear. It picked up the hum of the hotel refrigerator and the nervous tapping of Garrett's foot against the carpet. There was a knock on their hotel door. Garrett jumped up to answer it. A man stepped inside. He was short with a sheen of sweat on his forehead and a suit that looked like it had been slept in. He carried a battered leather briefcase. Vance had identified him within minutes of his arrival at the hotel. His name was Dr. Eris Thorne. He was a disgraced psychiatrist who had lost his license in 2 states for overprescribing opioids, but he still operated in the shadows for clients who needed medical ethics to look the other way. He was exactly the kind of man Garrett would find. Garrett did not offer him a seat. He went straight to the desk and picked up a thick white envelope. I knew what was inside. It was the cash he had scraped together, likely the last of the loan from Sterling, or perhaps money he had stolen from Camilla's jewelry box. He held the envelope out but pulled it back when Dr. Thorne reached for it. "Do you have the papers?" Garrett asked, his voice tight. Dr. Thorne nodded and patted his briefcase. "I have them prepared just as we discussed. A full psychiatric evaluation dating back 6 months. It details a rapid cognitive decline, hallucinations, paranoia, inability to care for self or finances. It recommends immediate and permanent conservatorship." Garrett handed over the envelope. Dr. Thorne counted the money quickly, his fingers moving with the practiced speed of a man used to illicit transactions. He nodded satisfied and pulled a sheaf of documents from his bag. He placed them on the table. "Sign here as the petitioner," Thorne said, pointing a yellow stained finger at the line. "And here, I have already notarized my section. As far as the state of Florida is concerned, your father-in-law is no longer a person. He is a ward of the state, and you are his guardian." I watched as Garrett signed my life away. He did not hesitate. The pen scratched across the paper loud in the silence of my apartment. He was signing away my freedom, my dignity, and my rights. He was declaring me incompetent. He was declaring me a child in the eyes of the law. Camilla stood by the window looking out at the city lights. She was drinking a glass of wine. She turned as Garrett finished signing. "Is it done?" she asked. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "It is done," Garrett said, a grin spreading across his face that made my stomach turn. "He is ours now. Or rather, his signature is ours." Dr. Thorne packed up his money and left without a word. Garrett picked up the papers and kissed them. He actually kissed the documents that certified I was insane. "We did it, babe," he said, walking over to Camilla. "We won." I watched them on the screen. I watched the celebration of my demise, but the horror was just beginning. They sat down on the hotel bed and began to plan the next phase. It was one thing to steal my rights. It was another to decide what to do with the body. "So what happens now?" Camilla asked, taking a long sip of wine. "We get the boat money. We pay off Sterling. But what do we do with Dad? We cannot take him back to Chicago. We do not have room, and I am not changing his diapers if he actually gets sick." Garrett laughed. He lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling. "Chicago." Garrett scoffed. "He is never seeing Chicago again. I found a place. It is perfect. It is a state-funded facility out in the Glades. It is called Shady Acres, but the reviews say it is basically a waiting room for the morgue. It is cheap, Camilla. Dirt cheap. They take indigent patients with no family support. Since we control his assets, we can claim he has no money for private care. The state pays for the bed." He sat up, his eyes shining with cruelty. "We drop him off there on our way out of town. We tell the administrators he is violent and confused. We tell them he makes up stories about being rich. They will medicate him until he does not know his own name. He will sit in a chair staring at a wall until he dies. And we will be on a beach in Cabo, enjoying the proceeds from the Black Pearl." I listened to my son-in-law describe my living burial. He painted a picture of a place where the air smelled of urine and bleach, where the food was gray paste, and where no one came to visit. He described a prison where the only release was death. And Camilla, my daughter, the girl I had taught to ride a bike, the girl I had protected from every storm, sat there and nodded. "It is for the best," she said. Her voice was trying to sound reasonable, trying to justify the monstrous thing they were planning. "He is happy living in squalor anyway. He won't know the difference. And really, Garrett, we are doing him a favor. He won't have to worry about rent or food. He will be taken care of." Taken care of. It was the same phrase one might use for an old dog being put to sleep. Besides, she added, finishing her wine, "He was never really there for me anyway. He was always working, always tired. Now he can rest. And we can finally live the life we deserve, the life they deserved, a life built on the corpse of my freedom." Garrett stood up and started pacing again, energized by the victory. "Tomorrow," he said, "tomorrow morning we go back to that dump apartment. We show him the papers. If he refuses to sign over the boat rights voluntarily, we call the police. We show them the medical order. We have them drag him out in handcuffs if we have to. Then we drive him straight to the facility. We sell the boat by noon. We wire the money to Sterling by 2. We are free, Camilla. We are finally free." I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark. The silence of the room felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I felt a coldness spreading through my chest, starting at my heart and moving outward until my fingers were numb. They were going to lock me away. They were going to drug me. They were going to erase Cedric Thornton from the world so they could pay for their mistakes. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. A stray cat was picking through a garbage can. It was fighting for survival. I knew how it felt. I reached for my secure phone. I dialed Vance. He picked up on the first ring. "Did you see it?" I asked. "I saw it, Mr. Thornton." Vance said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "I have the recording saved. The legal team is reviewing it now. Sir, we can have them arrested tonight. Conspiracy to commit fraud, kidnapping, we have enough. Let me send the boys in." I considered it. I imagined the police kicking down their hotel door. I imagined Garrett in handcuffs. It would be satisfying, but it would be too quick. It would be too clean. They would get lawyers. They would plead desperation. They would spin a story. "No," I said. "Not yet," Sir Vance said, surprised. "They are coming for you in the morning. They have a signed court order, however fraudulent it is. If the police see that paper, they will have to take you into custody until we can prove it is fake. It could take days. You do not want to spend days in a state facility." "I am not going to be here in the morning," I said. "I am changing the venue." "What do you mean?" Vance asked. "Garrett wants the boat," I said. "He wants the Black Pearl. He thinks it is his ticket to freedom. I am going to give it to him." I walked over to the table and picked up the burner phone. "I am going to invite them to a party, Vance. A farewell party. I want everyone there. I want the crew in full dress uniform. I want the best champagne. I want the decks scrubbed until they shine. And Vance, I want you to call Mr. Sterling." "Sterling, the loan shark?" Vance asked. Yes, I said. Tell him Garrett Black is trying to flee the country. Tell him Garrett is selling assets to buy plane tickets. Tell him if he wants his money, he needs to come to the marina tomorrow at sunset. Tell him I will personally guarantee he gets a front row seat. I heard Vance typing on a keyboard. You are bringing the wolf to the dinner table, sir. I am the wolf, Vance, I said. Sterling is just the teeth. I hung up the phone. I looked at the burner phone in my hand. I channeled the weak, confused old man one last time. I typed a text to Camilla. My hands were steady. My heart was cold. Camilla, I wrote, I have good news. I spoke to Big Tony again. He saw the medical papers for Leo. He cried. He said he cannot let a child die. He signed the papers. The boat is yours. He just has one request. He wants a farewell party, a toast to the boat and to Leo. Come to the marina tomorrow at 5 p.m. Bring Garrett. Bring your friends. Let's celebrate. I hit send. I watched the message deliver. I watched the 3 dots appear as she typed back almost instantly. Oh, Daddy, thank you. Thank you. We will be there. We love you so much. I stared at the words. We love you so much. They were the last lies she would ever tell me. I packed my bag. I took the Patek Philippe out of the oven and put it on my wrist. The weight of it felt good. It felt like armor. I was done hiding. I was done playing the victim. Tomorrow I was going to step back onto my ship. Tomorrow I was going to be Cedric Thornton the tycoon. And when they stepped onto my deck thinking they were kings, they would find out they were just trespassing in a kingdom they could never understand. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The morning sun hit the white hull of the Black Pearl, making it gleam like a diamond sitting on the dark water. I walked up the gangway not as the broken old man from the tenement, but as Cedric Thornton, owner of the harbor and the vessel beneath my feet. The moment my foot touched the teak deck, I felt the change. My posture straightened. The ache in my joints, which had seemed so real in the damp apartment, vanished. I was home. My crew was lined up in full-dress whites waiting for me. Captain Moretti, a man who had been with me for 15 years, stepped forward and saluted. He did not look at my stained work pants or my flannel shirt. He looked at my eyes. Welcome home, Mr. Thornton, he said. Is everything prepared? I asked. Moretti nodded. The stage is set, sir. The security team is hidden in the lower cabins. The cameras are rolling. The champagne is on ice. And we have prepared the costume you requested. I walked to the master suite. It was a sanctuary of mahogany and leather worlds away from the peeling linoleum of 4th Street. I stripped off the rags of my disguise. I showered, scrubbing the smell of the slum off my skin with sandalwood soap. Then I dressed. But I did not put on my Italian suit yet. That was for the finale. Instead, I put on a pair of black trousers and a white steward's jacket. It was the uniform of my service staff. It fit perfectly. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a servant. I looked like help. It was a specific choice. I wanted to give Garrett exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be the king, so I would be the serf. I wanted him to feel the power rush to his head like cheap wine. I wanted him to be so drunk on his own arrogance that he would not see the guillotine until the blade was already falling. I went back out on deck. The crew watched me with tight jaws. They hated this. They hated seeing the man who signed their paychecks, the man who had paid for their children's surgeries and their mortgages, dressed like a busboy. Relax, I told them. It is just a role. Tonight we are actors, and the audience is about to arrive. I checked the arrangements one last time. The hors d'oeuvres were laid out. The bar was stocked. I had ordered the good champagne. Not for them, but for me. I intended to enjoy my victory toast with the best vintage available. At 5 o'clock, the cars began to arrive. It was not just Garrett and Camilla. It was a convoy. A stretch Hummer and 2 luxury sedans pulled up to the private gate. I watched from the upper deck as they spilled out. Garrett was wearing a white tuxedo jacket. He looked like a waiter at a bad wedding. Camilla was in a gold sequined dress that caught the sun and blinded anyone looking directly at her. But they were not alone. They had brought an entourage. There were about 20 people. I recognized a few of them from the background checks Vance had run. There were minor Instagram influencers, people who were famous for being famous. There were guys in shiny suits who looked like they sold crypto scams. There were women who looked bored before they even stepped onto the pier. This was Garrett's play. He was not just coming to take the boat. He was coming to launch his brand. He was using my property to prove to the world that he had made it. He was selling the lie before he even owned the truth. They walked up the pier laughing loudly. Garrett was leading the pack, pointing at the black pearl as if he had built it with his own hands. "There she is," he shouted, his voice booming over the water. "The Vector 1. He had already renamed it. He had renamed my ship. I went down to the main deck and stood by the bar holding a silver tray. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders slump. They boarded without asking permission. Their heels clicked on the expensive wood. They touched the polished railings with greasy hands. They looked around with hungry eyes, calculating the price of everything they saw. Garrett saw me. He stopped mid-stride. A look of annoyance crossed his face, as if I were a stain on his perfect white jacket. "Dad," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "What are you wearing?" I looked down at my uniform. I wanted to help," I stammered, playing the part. "I thought I could serve the drinks. Tony's crew is gone. It is just me." Garrett laughed. He turned to his friends. "Everyone, this is Cedric, my father-in-law. He is a little confused these days, but he likes to feel useful." The crowd laughed. It was a cruel sound, a sound of dismissal. "Well, don't just stand there," Cedric Garrett snapped, snapping his fingers at me. "Get these people some champagne. We are celebrating." I moved. I uncorked a bottle. I poured. I walked among them, offering glasses to people who did not even look at me. I was invisible. I was furniture. One of Garrett's friends, a man with slicked back hair and a suit that cost less than my shoes, took a glass from my tray without saying thank you. "Nice boat," he said to Garrett. "How did you swing this?" Garrett took a glass from my tray, his fingers brushing mine. He did not even acknowledge the contact. "Hard work." "Bro," Garrett said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Vector Systems exploded this quarter. We acquired a logistics subsidiary. This was part of the asset liquidation. It is just a starter yacht, really. We are looking at something bigger for next year." He was lying to their faces, and they were eating it up because they wanted to believe. They wanted to be close to the money. Camilla was holding court on the aft deck lounge. She was sitting on my favorite sunbed wearing shoes that I knew were forbidden on deck because they scratched the finish. I walked over to offer her a drink. "Thank you, Dad," she said without looking at me. Her eyes were scanning the horizon, scanning the crowd, making sure everyone was looking at her. "Dad," she said, keeping her voice low. "Try not to embarrass us, okay? Just pour the drinks and stay in the background. Garrett has some important investors here. We need this to look professional." Professional. She was sitting on a stolen boat, drinking stolen champagne, talking about professionalism. "I understand," I murmured. "I will be quiet." "Good," she said. "Oh, and fetch my shawl from the car later. It might get chilly." She dismissed me with a wave of her hand. I walked away, the tray trembling slightly in my hands, not from fear, but from the effort it took not to throw the entire tray of crystal flutes into the ocean. They treated the crew like servants, but they treated me like a slave. They had dehumanized me completely. To them, I was just a mechanism to deliver the inheritance. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in blood red. It was time. Garrett walked to the center of the upper deck. He tapped a spoon against his glass. The sharp ring cut through the chatter. "Attention, everyone," Garrett shouted. "Gather round." The crowd moved toward him. I stood at the edge near the railing holding a bottle of champagne like a prop. "I want to make a toast," Garrett said, raising his glass. He looked around the boat, looking at the luxury, looking at the city skyline in the distance. He looked like a man who believed he had conquered the world. "To Vector Systems," he said, "and to family." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "You know, a lot of you have asked me how I do it, how I balance the pressures of a high-growth tech company with my personal life, and I have to be honest, it is not easy. It takes sacrifice." He paused for dramatic effect. He looked sad. He looked noble. "Recently, we have had to make some hard decisions. My father-in-law, Cedric here," he pointed at me. Every eye on the deck turned to look at the old man in the waiter's jacket. "He has been struggling," Garrett said, his voice dropping to a somber tone. "His mind is not what it used to be. He gets confused. He thinks he has friends who don't exist. He lives in the past." Camilla wiped a fake tear from her eye. The crowd murmured sympathetically. "We decided to buy this boat not just for the company," Garrett continued, "but for him. We are going to sell it to fund his care. We found a wonderful facility where he can get the help he needs. It is going to cost a fortune, but you cannot put a price on family right." A round of applause broke out. They were clapping for him. They were clapping for the saint who was sacrificing his millions to take care of his senile father-in-law. "So tonight is bittersweet," Garrett said. "We are saying goodbye to the boat, but we are saying hello to a new future. A future where Vector Systems dominates the market and where Cedric is safe and sound." He raised his glass higher. "To the future," he roared. "To the future," the crowd echoed. I stood there gripping the neck of the bottle. I watched him drink. I watched him smile that shark smile. He really believed it. He believed he had won. He believed he could rewrite reality with a speech and a rented tuxedo. He did not hear the sound at first, the thumping rhythm in the distance, but I heard it. I felt it in the deck plates. The applause died down. Garrett was about to speak again to launch into another lie about his blockchain technology when the wind picked up. The surface of the water rippled. The sound grew louder, a heavy chopping noise that vibrated in the chest. Garrett looked up. The crowd looked up. A black helicopter banked around the side of the marina. It was flying low, too low for regulations, but when you have enough money, regulations are just suggestions. It hovered over the water, the downdraft whipping Camilla's hair across her face and blowing napkins off the bar. The helicopter turned and lined up with the helipad on the upper deck of the Black Pearl. Garrett's mouth opened. He looked at me confused. "Did you order a chopper?" he shouted over the noise. I just shook my head and shrugged, acting terrified. The helicopter descended. It was a sleek, corporate machine, the kind used by heads of state and billionaires. The landing gear touched down on the deck with a heavy thud. The engines whined down, but the rotors kept spinning, slicing the air. The side door opened. Garrett stepped forward, trying to regain control of his party, trying to act like this was part of the show. "Who is this?" he asked, looking around nervously. "Is this a surprise?" A man stepped out of the helicopter. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a suit that cost more than the Black Pearl's fuel bill for a year. He had silver hair and a face carved from granite. It was Marcus Sterling, the loan shark, the man who owned Garrett's debt, and the man I had invited to the show. Garrett went pale. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He took a step back, bumping into one of his influencer friends. "Mr. Sterling." Garrett squeaked. His voice was high and thin, barely audible over the rotors. Sterling did not look at him. He stepped onto the deck, flanked by two bodyguards who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. He scanned the crowd, his eyes cold and dismissive. Garrett tried to recover. He put on his best salesman smile, though it looked like a grimace of pain. "Marcus," he said, spreading his arms. I did not know you were coming. Welcome aboard. This is the asset I was telling you about. We are finalizing the sale tomorrow." Sterling walked right past him. He walked through the crowd of fake rich people, parting them like the Red Sea. He walked straight toward the bar, straight toward me. Garrett panicked. He ran after Sterling, grabbing his arm. No, Mr. Sterling, don't bother him. That is just the help. That is my father-in-law. He is the one I told you about. The senile one. He thinks he works here." Sterling stopped. He looked at Garrett's hand on his arm. He looked at it with such intensity that Garrett snatched his hand back as if he had touched a hot stove. Sterling turned back to me. He ignored the waiter's jacket. He ignored the tray. He looked me in the eye. And then, in front of everyone, in front of the daughter who betrayed me and the son-in-law who tried to bury me, Marcus Sterling, the most feared man in the city, bowed. It was a deep, respectful bow, a bow of one king acknowledging another. Chairman Thornton Sterling said, his voice carrying across the silent deck. "I received your invitation. It is an honor to be here. I did not know you employed this parasite." Sterling gestured to Garrett without looking at him. I stared at Garrett. His face was a mask of absolute confusion and dawning horror. He looked from Sterling to me and back again. The pieces were not fitting. The world was tilting on its axis. Chairman Garrett whispered. "Thornton." I set the champagne bottle down on the bar. I picked up a napkin and slowly, deliberately wiped my hands. I stood up straight, letting the years of stooping fall away. I let the authority I had wielded for a decade flood back into my posture. He is not an employee. "Marcus," I said, my voice deep and steady, the voice of the boardroom, not the tenement. "He is a mistake I am about to correct." I looked at Garrett, and for the first time in 10 years he saw me. He really saw me, and he was terrified. The rhythmic thumping of the helicopter blades grew louder until it was a physical force hammering against the chest of every person on the deck. The champagne flutes on the bar began to dance and rattle against each other, creating a high-pitched chime of warning. Garrett stopped his speech mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open as the shadow of the aircraft fell over him, swallowing his moment of glory in darkness. The wind from the rotors hit the deck like a hurricane, whipping the tablecloths into a frenzy and sending napkins spiraling into the darkening sky like white birds of surrender. Camilla screamed as her carefully styled hair was torn from its pins, whipping across her face and blinding her temporarily. The influencers and fake investors grabbed their hats and their drinks, cowering from the sudden violence of the air displacement. I stood by the bar, clutching the neck of the champagne bottle, my feet planted firmly on the teak deck. I knew this wind. I knew this power. This was not just not a machine. It was a statement. The black helicopter hovered for a moment, a predatory insect deciding where to strike before descending with practiced precision onto the helipad. The landing gear touched down with a heavy metallic thud that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. The engines began to wind down, but the rotors continued to slice the air, creating a barrier of noise that made conversation impossible. Garrett looked around wildly, panic flaring in his eyes. He had not ordered a helicopter. He did not have the money for a helicopter. He looked at me accusingly, as if I, the senile old waiter, had somehow summoned this beast from the sky. I just stared back, my face a mask of terrified confusion, giving him exactly what he expected to see. He turned to his guests, shouting over the noise, trying to salvage his image of control. "Stay calm, everyone," he yelled, waving his arms. "Just a surprise guest, a VIP investor who likes to make an entrance." But his voice cracked, betraying the terror clawing at his throat. The side door of the helicopter slid open, revealing the dark interior. A set of steps unfolded, automatically hitting the deck with a clang. 2 men stepped out first. They were massive, dressed in black tactical suits with earpieces and eyes that scanned the crowd as if looking for a target. They were professional security, the kind that cost serious money, the kind that did not ask questions. They just removed problems. Then a third man emerged. He stepped onto the deck with the casual arrogance of a man who owned the air he breathed. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him like a second skin. The fabric clearly Italian, the cut aggressive. He adjusted his silk tie and smoothed his silver hair back, running a hand through it, as if the hurricane-force wind was nothing more than a gentle breeze. It was Marcus Sterling, the loan shark, the man who held the deed to Garrett's life. Garrett's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. The glass of champagne in his hand shook so violently that liquid spilled over the rim, staining his white tuxedo jacket. He took a step back, bumping into the railing as if he wanted to jump overboard and take his chances with the sharks in the water, rather than face the shark on the deck. "Sterling," I heard him whisper the name, like a curse. Garrett looked for an escape route, but there was none. The boat was surrounded by water, and the only exit was blocked by the man he owed $3 million to. He swallowed hard and forced a smile onto his face. It was a grotesque expression, a rictus of fear masquerading as welcome. He straightened his jacket and walked toward the helipad, his legs stiff. "Mr. Sterling," Garrett shouted, his voice shrill, attempting to project confidence over the dying whine of the engines. "What a surprise. I did not know you were coming to the farewell party." Sterling did not answer. He did not even look at Garrett. He walked down the steps of the helipad, his eyes scanning the deck, ignoring the guests as if they were ghosts. He was looking for someone. Garrett intercepted him, stepping into his path, blocking his view. "Marcus, please," Garrett said quickly, speaking fast and low, desperation leaking from every syllable. "We are just celebrating the sale. I have the money lined up. The wire transfer is happening tomorrow morning as soon as the banks open. You did not have to come all the way out here. I was going to call you." Sterling stopped. He looked down at Garrett with eyes that were cold and dead. "You were going to call me Sterling," repeated his voice, smooth and deep, carrying a threat in its calmness. "You were going to call me from a non-extradition country. Garrett, my sources tell me you were looking at one-way tickets to Cabo." Garrett let out a nervous laugh, shaking his head frantically. No, that is a misunderstanding, Marcus. I am expanding the business. International logistics. You know how it is. This boat, this is the collateral. It is worth $15 million. I am selling it to pay you back with interest, heavy interest." Sterling finally looked around the boat. His gaze landed on the bar where I was standing. Head bowed, holding the silver tray, Garrett saw where he was looking and panic seized him. He grabbed Sterling's arm, trying to physically turn him away from me. "No, Marcus, do not look over there," Garrett said, his voice rising in hysteria. "That is nobody, just the help. We hired some locals to serve drinks. This one is a bit senile, honestly. He is confused, thinks he is part of the crew. It is sad, really. We are doing a charity thing, letting him feel useful." Sterling looked at Garrett's, hand on his arm. The look was enough to make Garrett snatch his hand back as if he had touched molten iron. "The help?" Sterling asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, the help," Garrett babbled, sweat running down his face, ruining his fake tan. "He is my father-in-law, actually. Poor old Cedric. Lost his mind years ago. He used to work on the docks, you know, a manual laborer. Simple guy. He does not know who you are. He does not know what is going on. Just ignore him. Let's go to the VIP lounge. Inside, I have some very expensive scotch. We can talk numbers." Garrett was trying to bury me. He was trying to erase me, to turn me into a prop in his con. He was so terrified of the truth coming out that he was willing to humiliate me in front of the man who could kill him. Sterling brushed the imaginary dust off his sleeve where Garrett had touched him. He looked at Garrett with a mixture of amusement and disgust. "You think he is the help?" Sterling asked. "I know he is," Garrett insisted, laughing nervously. "He is wearing the jacket, isn't he? Look at him. He is shaking. He is terrified of you, Marcus. You are a scary guy." Sterling smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who has cornered its prey and is playing with it before the kill. "You are right, Garrett," Sterling said. "I am a scary guy. But do you know who scares me?" Garrett blinked, confused. "Nobody scares you, Marcus. You are the boss." Sterling shook his head slowly. "No, Garrett. There is one man in this city who scares me. One man whose phone call I answer on the first ring. One man who controls the port, the unions, and half the shipping traffic on the eastern seaboard." Garrett looked around confused. "Who?" Sterling did not answer him. He simply walked forward. He pushed past Garrett, shoving him aside with a shoulder check that sent my son-in-law stumbling into a waiter carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. The tray crashed to the deck, scattering shrimp and cocktail sauce across the teak. Sterling walked through the crowd. The guests parted like the Red Sea, sensing the power radiating from him. The music had stopped completely. The only sound was the lap of the water and the heavy footsteps of Marcus Sterling walking toward the bar. I stood there gripping the tray, my knuckles white. I watched him come. I did not move. I did not look up. I waited for the moment that would shatter Garrett's world. Sterling stopped 3 feet in front of me. He stood there for a second, looking at my stained pants, my cheap shoes, my waiter jacket. Then he did something that made the entire deck gasp. Marcus Sterling, the man who broke knees for a living, the man who owned the police and the politicians, straightened his back, snapped his heels together, and bowed. It was a deep, formal bow, a bow of absolute submission. Chairman Thornton Sterling said, his voice ringing out clear and respectful in the silence. He held the bow for a long second, then straightened up and looked me in the eye. "I received your message, sir. I came as fast as I could." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, a void where sound used to exist. Camilla dropped her wine glass. It hit the deck and shattered red wine splashing over her gold dress like blood. She did not notice. She was staring at Sterling, her mouth open, her eyes wide. Garrett was frozen. He was standing by the helipad looking at Sterling, then at me, then back at Sterling. His brain was trying to process the data and failing. It was a computer crashing, a system overload. Chairman Garrett whispered the word, escaping his lips like a prayer. Chairman Thornton Sterling repeated, turning his head slightly to look at Garrett with contempt. "You told me he was the help. You told me he was senile." I slowly placed the silver tray on the bar. The metal made a sharp clink against the wood. I picked up a linen napkin and wiped my hands deliberately, removing the invisible stain of servitude. I lifted my head. I straightened my spine, letting the years of feigned weakness fall away like a heavy coat. I looked at Garrett. I looked at Camilla. And then I looked at Sterling. "Thank you for coming, Marcus," I said, my voice deep and commanding, the voice that had negotiated billion-dollar contracts. The voice that commanded respect from the toughest men on the waterfront. "It appears," I said, looking at my son-in-law, who was now trembling so hard his knees were knocking together, "that there has been a misunderstanding." My son-in-law seems to be under the impression that he owns this vessel, and he seems to be under the impression that I am his servant." Sterling laughed a short, sharp bark of sound. "He owns this vessel. That is rich. That is truly rich." Sterling turned fully toward Garrett, crossing his arms over his massive chest. "Garrett," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a growl, "you tried to sell me a boat that belongs to Cedric Thornton. You tried to sell the Black Pearl to the man who finances half of Thornton Logistics." Garrett's legs gave out. He collapsed onto a deck chair, his face a mask of sheer terror. He looked at me, and for the first time he saw the truth. He saw the eyes of the man he had thrown out into the snow. He saw the eyes of the man who had built an empire from nothing. And he realized with a dawning horror that he was not the shark. He was the bait. The silence that descended upon the deck of the Black Pearl was heavier than the humid Florida air. It was a suffocating blanket that smothered the music, the laughter, and the clinking of glasses. The only sound remaining was the gentle lap of water against the hull and the ragged breathing of my son-in-law, who looked as though his heart might stop at any moment. Marcus Sterling, the most feared predator in the city, was standing with his head bowed in reverence to a man wearing a stained waiter jacket. The image was so incongruous, so impossible that the brains of the people watching simply refused to process it. They stared with mouths agape, their eyes darting back and forth, trying to find the punchline to a joke they did not understand. Then Camilla laughed. It was a brittle, high-pitched sound that cracked the silence like a dropped glass stepping forward, her gold-sequined dress shimmering under the deck lights. She looked at Sterling with a mixture of confusion and desperate condescension. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you must be mistaken. This is my father, Cedric. He is nobody. He is a retired dock worker who lives in a tenement on 4th Street. He does not have 2 nickels to rub together. He is just helping out tonight because he gets confused and likes to feel useful." She turned to the crowd, flashing a bright, terrified smile, trying to regain control of the narrative, trying to put the genie back in the bottle. "My father has a vivid imagination," she announced loud enough for the back row to hear. "He tells stories. Sometimes he thinks he is the captain. Sometimes he thinks he is the owner. We just play along because it makes him happy. Poor thing. He is harmless, really." She reached out to touch my arm, a gesture of ownership and dismissal. "Dad, why don't you go downstairs and rest? You are embarrassing yourself and Mr. Sterling." Sterling did not move. He did not look at Camilla. He kept his eyes locked on mine, waiting for a command, waiting for the signal. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The influencers lowered their phones, unsure if they were filming a tragedy or a farce. Garrett was the only one who seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He was staring at Sterling's posture, at the genuine respect in the older man's eyes, and the blood was draining from his face so fast I thought he might faint. Camilla, however, was relentless. Her denial was a fortress built to protect her from the truth. She could not accept that the man she had discarded was powerful, because if I was powerful, then she was a fool. She turned back to Sterling, her voice sharpening. "Listen, I do not know who told you he was a chairman, but this is ridiculous. Look at him. Look at his clothes. Look at his hands. He is a laborer. He is nothing. You are making a mistake." I looked at my daughter. I looked at the woman who had locked me out in the snow 10 years ago. I saw the fear behind her arrogance. I saw the desperate need to be right, to be superior. It was the last time I would ever look at her with anything resembling pity. "That is enough, Camilla," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking a sounding board. It cut through her babbling like a knife. She stopped mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open. The crowd fell silent again, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. The air on the deck seemed to charge with electricity. I stepped away from the bar. I did not shuffle. I did not hunch. I walked to the center of the deck, with the long, confident strides of a man who has walked into boardrooms and silenced billionaires with a look. I stopped in front of a large, brass-lined mirror that hung near the entrance to the main salon. I looked at myself in the reflection. The white waiter jacket was stained with wine and sweat. It was the uniform of servitude, the costume of the victim. I had played for their benefit. "It is time to change," I said to the reflection. Slowly, deliberately, I reached up and undid the top button of the white jacket. My fingers were steady. The crowd watched, mesmerized by the simple action. I undid the second button. Then the third. I shrugged the jacket off my shoulders, letting it slide down my arms. I did not hand it to anyone. I did not fold it. I let it drop to the teak deck where it lay in a crumpled heap like a shed skin. Underneath, I was wearing a navy blue Tom Ford suit, bespoke cut, to fit my broad shoulders perfectly. The fabric caught the light, absorbing it with a rich matte finish that screamed quality. I adjusted my cuffs, revealing the Patek Philippe watch that Garrett had failed to notice in the apartment. It gleamed with the dull, heavy shine of platinum. I straightened my silk tie, the knot perfect and tight. I ran a hand through my gray hair, smoothing it back, revealing the strong lines of my face. The confused old man was gone. In his place stood Cedric Thornton, the man who had turned a single delivery truck into a global logistics empire. The transformation was physical, but it was also spiritual. I let the power I had held in reserve flow back into my limbs. I stood to my full height, looming over Garrett and Camilla. The gasps from the crowd were audible. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered, but no one looked down. They were too busy looking at me. Garrett was shaking his head slowly back and forth as if trying to deny the evidence of his own eyes. "No," he whispered. "No. It is a trick. It is a costume." I turned to face him. I fixed him with a stare that could melt steel. "A costume?" I asked, my voice deep and resonant, echoing off the water. "You think this is a costume?" "Garrett, the waiter jacket was the costume. The tenement apartment was the set. This is the reality." I took a step toward him and he took a step back, stumbling over his own feet. "You wanted a bridge loan," I said. "You wanted capital. You wanted to sell my boat to pay your gambling debts to the man standing right behind you." I pointed at Sterling, who crossed his arms and smiled a cold, predatory smile. "You thought you could trick a senile old man," I continued. "You thought you could forge medical documents for a grandson who is perfectly healthy, playing soccer in Vermont." The crowd erupted into whispers. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and damning. Camilla covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. She did not know I knew about Leo. She did not know I had checked. "You thought you could rob me of my dignity?" I said, my voice rising steadily. "You thought you could lock me in a state facility and throw away the key. You thought I was weak. You thought I was alone." I spread my arms, encompassing the yacht, the crew, the security team, and the city skyline beyond. "But you made a fatal calculation, Garrett. You judged a book by its cover, and you forgot to check who owned the library." I turned to the crowd of onlookers, the fake friends, the sycophants, the people who had come to celebrate Garrett's success. "You want to know the truth?" I asked them. They nodded, terrified and fascinated. "Garrett told you he bought this boat with the profits from Vector Systems," I said. "Vector Systems is a shell company with a bank balance of zero. This boat, the Black Pearl, was bought with cash. 5 years ago by me. I walked over to the captain, who handed me a microphone. I switched it on. The feedback whined for a second, then settled. "My name is Cedric Thornton," I said, my voice booming over the speakers filling the marina. "I am the founder and CEO of Thornton Logistics." I pointed to the massive cranes visible in the distance, towering over the commercial port, their lights twinkling in the twilight. "Do you see those cranes? I own them. Do you see the containers stacked a mile high in the south yard? I own them. Do you see the concrete beneath your feet? The pier we are docked at? I own that too." I turned back to Garrett and Camilla, who were now huddled together looking like children caught in a storm. "I did not win the lottery," I said with contempt. "I did not stumble into money. I built this. I worked 18-hour days while you were sleeping. I saved every dollar while you were buying designer clothes. I invested in infrastructure while you were betting on horses. I am not lucky. I am relentless." I walked up to Camilla. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, ruining her mascara. "You asked me if I could sell the boat to help your family," I said softly, so only she in the front row could hear. "You asked me to sacrifice the only thing you thought I had left. And when I hesitated, you planned to destroy me." I leaned in close. "I would have given you the world, Camilla," I said. "I would have given you everything. But you did not want a father. You wanted an ATM. And when the ATM did not dispense cash fast enough, You tried to smash it with a hammer. I straightened up and addressed the crowd again. Welcome to the Black Pearl, I announced. Welcome to my ship, and welcome to the end of the lie. I signaled to the captain. Cut the music, I ordered. The speakers went dead. The party atmosphere evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold, hard reality of judgment. Turn on the main screen, I commanded. A massive LED screen rose from the floor of the upper deck. It was usually used for movie nights or corporate presentations. Tonight it was going to be used for an execution. Garrett looked at the screen and started to cry. He knew what was coming. He knew that Vance had been watching. He knew that there were no secrets left. Please, Cedric, he begged, dropping to his knees on the beautiful teak deck. Please don't do this. We can work this out. I will pay you back. I will do anything. I looked down at him with zero sympathy. You cannot pay me back, Garrett, I said. You are bankrupt. You are morally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt, and financially bankrupt. You have nothing to offer me except a lesson for everyone else. I looked at Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said, would you like to see where your money went? Sterling nodded, his eyes gleaming. Absolutely, Chairman, proceed. I pressed the button on the remote in my hand. The screen flared to life. The first image was not a spreadsheet. It was a video. It was grainy black and white footage taken from inside a hotel room. It showed Garrett and Camilla sitting on a bed counting stacks of cash, laughing. I watched the color drain from Camilla's face. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the silent, judging crowd. No, she whispered. No. Yes, I said. The video played. It was the recording of them plotting to put me in the home. It was the recording of Garrett calling me a useless old man. It was the recording of them agreeing to forge the medical documents. The audio boomed over the speakers, crisp and clear. We drop him off there on our way out of town, Garrett's voice said on the video. We tell the administrators he is violent and confused. They will medicate him until he does not know his own name. The crowd gasped. The influencers stopped filming, looking at each other in horror. The crypto bros looked at their shoes, ashamed to be associated with such naked cruelty. I let it play. I let every word sink in. I let the toxicity of their own souls fill the air until it was choking them. Then I paused the video on a freeze frame of Garrett's laughing face. This is who they are, I said to the crowd. This is the man who wanted your investment. This is the woman who wanted your envy. They are not successful. They are not rich. They are patricides in training. They plan to bury me alive to pay for their mistakes. I looked at Garrett, who was now sobbing into his hands. But I am not dead, I said. I am very much alive, and I am the landlord. I am the bank, and tonight I am the judge. I turned to Vance, who had appeared at the edge of the crowd holding a thick file. Mr. Vance, I said loud and clear. Execute the protocols. Vance nodded, pulling out his phone. It is done, sir, Vance said. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, getting closer fast. Blue and red lights reflected off the water, dancing across the white hull of the Black Pearl. Garrett looked up, his eyes wide and wet. What did you do? He whispered. I did what any good father would do, I said, cold as the grave. I taught you a lesson. Actions have consequences, and yours are arriving right now. Garrett stood there for a moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the water. The shock of seeing Marcus Sterling bow to me had shattered his reality, but his survival instinct was kicking in. It was a desperate, frantic thing, ugly to watch. He looked around at the crowd, at the faces of the people he had been trying to impress, and he saw their confusion. He saw a chance, a slim, impossible chance to spin this one last time. He let out a laugh. It was a loud, forced sound that grated on the ears. No, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. This is a trick. Do not listen to him, everyone. This is all a show. He hired these people. He turned to Sterling, his eyes wide and pleading. Marcus, I do not know how much he paid you, but it is a lie. My father-in-law is sick. He has dementia. He has delusions of grandeur. He thinks he is a billionaire. He thinks he owns the port. Look at him. He was wearing a waiter jacket 5 minutes ago. Does a billionaire wear a waiter jacket? Garrett ran to the middle of the deck, waving his arms, trying to herd the crowd back to his side. This is a performance art piece, he yelled, sweat flying from his face. It is an immersive theater experience. I arranged it for the party. See, the actors are staying in character. Bravo, very convincing. But the show is over now. You can stop pretending. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. Dad, stop it. You are scaring people. The joke is over. Tell them the truth. Tell them you live in a slum on 4th Street. Tell them I pay your rent. Tell them you are nothing. Camilla joined him, latching onto the lie like a lifeline. Yes, she screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. My father is unwell. He hires people to play these games. He spends his pension on fantasies. Please, everyone, just ignore him. He needs his medication. The crowd wavered. They looked at Garrett, then at me, then at Sterling. They wanted to believe Garrett because believing him meant the party could party. Continue believing him meant they were not fools standing on a stranger's boat. But Sterling did not move. He stood like a statue, his arms crossed, his face a mask of stone. He was not acting, he was waiting. I watched them dance, I watched them spin their web of lies trying to trap the truth, but the truth was too big. It was a tidal wave and they were holding up umbrellas. You say, I am nothing. Garrett, I asked, my voice cutting through his shouting. You say I am sick. You say I need medication. Yes, Garrett hissed, stepping closer, his fists clenched. Just admit it. Admit you are crazy so we can get you help. I smiled. It was the smile of the executioner pulling the lever. I do not need help, Garrett, I said. I need a projector. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. The sound was sharp like a pistol shot. Captain Moretti, standing in the bridge, pressed a button. The massive LED screen behind me, the one Garrett had planned to use for his victory lap, flickered. It went from black to a blinding white, illuminating the deck with a harsh, unforgiving light. The crowd gasped and shielded their eyes. Watch, I commanded. The screen settled into a grainy black and white image. The audio crackled to life, booming over the high-definition speakers. It was the interior of the apartment on 4th Street. The timestamp in the corner read 2 nights ago. Garrett's face on the screen was twisted in rage. He was pacing the small room, kicking the furniture. Sign this! He screamed on the video, his voice amplified, echoing across the water. It says you transfer all rights to me. Sign it or I swear to God, Cedric, I will beat you until you cannot remember your own name. The crowd on the deck went silent. The real Garrett stood frozen, staring at himself, threatening an old man. The Garrett on the screen grabbed the collar of my flannel shirt and slammed me against the wall. The thud was sickeningly loud. If you survive this night, the video, Garrett spat, I am putting you in a home. The cheapest, nastiest state-run facility. I can find a place where they tie you to the bed and feed you through a tube. I watched the faces of the guests. The influencers lowered their phones. The investors took a step back. The cruelty was naked. It was undeniable. There was no spin that could fix this. Garrett tried to speak, but no sound came out. He was watching his own soul being exposed. The video cut to a new scene. It was the hotel room. The camera angle was high, hidden in the smoke detector. Camilla was there sitting on the bed drinking wine. Garrett was counting cash. We drop him off there on our way out of town, Garrett said on the screen. We tell the administrators he is violent and confused. They will medicate him until he does not know his own name. He will sit in a chair staring at a wall until he dies. Camilla on the screen nodded. It is for the best, she said. He was never really there for me anyway. Now he can rest, and we can finally live the life we deserve. The real. Camilla let out a sob. She covered her face with her hands, trying to hide from the judgment of 100 eyes. She tried to run toward the stairs, but one of Sterling's security guards stepped in her path, blocking her exit. She was trapped in the prison of her own making, but I was not done. The worst was yet to come. The screen flickered again, displaying a document. It was the fake medical report from the Zurich Medical Institute, the one detailing the heart condition of my grandson Leo. The audio shifted to a phone call. It was a recording of Camilla speaking to me the day before. He is so sick. Dad, she sobbed on the recording. The doctors say he needs a transplant. Dr. Kruger says he can save him, but it costs $2 million cash. If we do not get that money, Leo is going to die. The crowd murmured. Sympathy rippled through them. They looked at Camilla, thinking maybe there was a justification. Maybe they were monsters, but they were desperate parents. Then the image changed. It was a photo, dated today. It was Leo, my grandson. He was not in a hospital bed. He was not hooked up to machines. He was on a soccer field in Vermont, wearing a bright green jersey, holding a trophy above his head. He was sunburnt, smiling, and vibrantly alive. Vance's voice played over the speakers, calm and professional. Subject: Leo Black. Location: Vermont Elite Soccer Camp. Status: healthy. No medical history of heart defects. Dr. Kruger, deceased 3 years ago. Documents are forgeries. The gasp from the crowd was physical. It sucked the air out of the marina. Using a sick child is a con. Using your own healthy child and inventing a terminal illness to steal money from your father is a level of depravity that most people cannot comprehend. Sterling uncrossed his arms. He looked at Garrett. He looked at him not with anger, but with the kind of revulsion one reserves for a cockroach found in a salad. "You use the boy," Sterling said, his voice low but carrying perfectly in the silence. "You told me you needed the money for business. You told your father-in-law you needed it for the boy." Garrett fell to his knees. It was not a theatrical gesture. It was gravity taking over. He had no legs to stand on. The lies had evaporated, leaving him suspended over the abyss. "It was not like that," Garrett sobbed, looking at the crowd, looking for anyone who would believe him. "We were desperate. We had to pay the debt. They were going to kill me." He pointed a shaking finger at Sterling. "He was going to kill me," Garrett screamed. "He is a monster. I did what I had to do to survive." Sterling did not blink. He looked at the crowd, then at me. "I am a businessman," Sterling said calmly. "I lend money. I expect repayment. I do not kill people, Garrett. I ruin them. Killing is bad for business. Ruining is profitable, and you did a fine job of ruining yourself without my help." The guests began to move. They backed away from Garrett and Camilla as if they were contagious. The circle around them widened, leaving them isolated in the center of the deck under the glare of the screen that was still playing the loop of their treachery. One of Garrett's friends. The man with the slicked-back hair walked up to him. He looked down at Garrett kneeling on the teak. "You make me sick," the man said. He spat on the deck inches from Garrett's hand. Then he turned and walked toward the gangway. It broke the dam. The crowd turned on them. The admiration they had feigned for Garrett turned instantly into vitriol. They felt foolish for believing him, and they hated him for it. "Fraud," someone shouted. "Lock them up," yelled another. Camila looked at her friends, the women she had shopped with, the women she had tried to impress. They looked at her with cold, dead eyes. One of them took a glass of red wine and threw the contents at Camilla's feet, splashing the hem of her gold dress. "You are disgusting," the woman said. "You deserve everything that is coming to you." Sterling walked over to Garrett. He stood over him, a dark tower of judgment. "You owe me $3 million, Garrett Sterling said, "and you tried to pay me with a stolen boat, belonging to the one man in this state. I do not cross. You are not just a bad debtor. You are a liability." Sterling looked at me. "What do you want to do with him, Chairman?" he asked. I looked at the screen where the video of Garrett threatening me was playing on a loop. I looked at the real Garrett weeping on the deck of my ship. I looked at Camilla, who was staring blankly at the horizon, her mind likely snapping under the weight of her exposure. "They wanted to erase me," I said. "I wanted to remind them who I am." I gestured to the screen. "Turn it off," I ordered. The screen went black, plunging the deck back into the soft twilight. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was the silence of a courtroom after the verdict has been read. "Get them off my ship," I said, "but I am not done with them yet." I walked over to Garrett and leaned down so my face was level with his. "You wanted a bridge loan," I whispered. "You wanted to connect your fantasy to reality. Well, Garrett, the bridge is burned. You are on the island now, and the tide is rising." The deck of the Black Pearl was silent, save for the ragged breathing of the man kneeling on the teak floor. Garrett looked up at Marcus Sterling with the eyes of a condemned prisoner looking at the hangman. He expected violence. He expected pain. He expected the kind of street justice that Sterling was famous for delivering. But Sterling did not reach for a weapon. He did not signal his bodyguards. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his charcoal suit and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a contract, a promissory note. Sterling looked at the paper, then he looked at me. He walked over and handed the document to me with a nod of respect. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said. taking the paper. My voice was calm, carrying the weight of absolute authority across the water. Garrett watched the exchange, his brow furrowed in confusion. He did not understand what was happening. His brain was trying to process why the shark was handing the bait to the fisherman. I looked at the document. It was the loan agreement Garrett had signed 3 years ago, the one that leveraged his life against $3 million. I looked at the interest rate. It was predatory. It was vicious. It was exactly what a desperate gambler signs when he has run out of options. I walked over to Garrett, standing over him so my shadow fell across his face, blocking out the last of the twilight. "You are confused, Garrett," I said. "You are wondering why Marcus Sterling is not breaking your legs right now. You are wondering why he is handing me your death warrant." Garrett nodded dumbly, unable to speak. "He is not hurting you because you do not owe him money anymore," I said, my voice dropping to a register of cold steel. "You do not owe Sterling Capital a single dime. Your debt has been purchased." I held the paper up so he could see his own signature at the bottom. "I bought it, Garrett," I said. "I bought your debt. I bought your mistakes. I bought your life. I wired $3 million to Sterling's offshore account 1 hour ago. You do not answer to the loan shark anymore. You answer to me." Garrett's eyes bulged. He scrambled backward on his knees as if I were something far worse than a gangster. And in that moment I was the father he had betrayed. I was the man whose dignity he had tried to steal. "You owe me $3 million, I continued, relentless. "And unlike Mr. Sterling, I do not accept payment plans. I do not accept excuses, and I certainly do not accept stolen yachts as collateral. I am calling the loan, Garrett. I am calling it in full right now." Garrett looked at Camilla, then back at me. I do not have it," he stammered, tears leaking from his eyes. "I do not have $3 million. You know I don't." "I know," I said. "I know exactly what you have, and I know exactly what you are about to lose." I turned to the shadows near the bridge. "Mr. Vance," I called out. "Execute the writ." Vance stepped into the light. He was no longer just my head of security. In his hand he held a leather portfolio embossed with the seal of the state court. He looked like the Reaper dressed in a bespoke suit. He walked toward us, his steps heavy and measured, the sound of doom approaching. Vance opened the portfolio and pulled out a sheaf of papers stamped with urgent red ink. He handed a copy to Garrett and another to Camilla, who was standing paralyzed by the railing. "What is this?" Camilla whispered, her hands trembling so hard she could barely hold the paper. "That is a writ of attachment," Vance said, his voice projecting clearly to the silent crowd. "Based on the evidence of fraud, attempted kidnapping, and elder abuse, coupled with the defaulted loan Mr. Thornton now holds, we petitioned the emergency court this afternoon. The judge granted an immediate freeze on all assets. Garrett tried to stand up, but his legs would not support him. "What does that mean?" he cried. "It means," Vance said, "consulting a list that as of 4:30 this afternoon you are homeless. The house in the suburbs has been seized. The locks were changed an hour ago by the sheriff. Your Tesla and the Range Rover have been towed. The accounts at Chase and Wells Fargo have been frozen and drained to offset the debt." Camilla let out a scream. It was a sound of pure materialism being ripped from her soul. "My house!" she shrieked. "You took my house, my clothes, my jewelry, everything," Vance confirmed coldly. "Everything purchased with proceeds from the loan or money stolen from Mr. Thornton is now property of the trust. Personal items have been bagged and placed in storage. You will receive the key to the unit once you pay the storage fees." Garrett pulled out his phone, frantically tapping the screen, trying to access his banking app. I watched as his face crumbled. He saw the zeros. He saw the red, negative numbers stretching out like a digital wound. He dropped the phone. It clattered onto the deck. "You cannot do this," Garrett whispered, looking up at me. "You cannot leave us with nothing. We have a child." I stepped closer, leaning down until I was inches from his face. "You have a child?" I asked. "You mean the child you used as a prop, the child you lied about dying to swindle me? You do not care about that boy, Garrett. You care about your image. You care about your comfort. You were willing to put me in a state facility to rot so you could keep your car. You were willing to erase me." I straightened up, towering over him. "I did not leave you with nothing," I said. "I left you with exactly what you earned, which is zero. You are right back where you started, Garrett. Only this time you do not have my daughter to bail you out, and you do not have my roof to sleep." Camilla ran to me, grabbing my arm, her fingernails digging into my suit jacket. "Daddy, please." she begged, her eyes wild. "Stop this. You are making your point. We learned our lesson. Give us the house back. We will pay you back. I promise. We will work. We will do anything." I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had closed the door on me 10 years ago. I carefully peeled her fingers off my suit one by one. "It is not my house, Camilla," I said. "It is the bank's house now, or rather my holding company's house, and I do not rent to tenants with a history of elder abuse." I turned my back on them. I looked out at the water. The sun was gone now. The sky was a bruised purple darkness. But in the distance I saw flashing lights, blue and red, pulsing against the black water. They were getting closer. Sirens wailed, cutting through the humid air, rising in pitch as they approached the marina. Garrett heard them too. He scrambled up, running to the railing. He looked out at the water and saw the flotilla. Approaching 2 police boats and a Coast Guard cutter were tearing through the harbor, their wakes churning the dark water into white foam. He turned back to me, his face a mask of absolute terror. "Cedric," he gasped. "What did you do?" "I did not do anything," I said calmly. "I just provided the evidence. The law is doing the rest." The boats pulled alongside the Black Pearl, engines roaring in reverse as they slowed. The wash from their hulls rocked the yacht, throwing Garrett off balance. Uniformed officers swarmed the deck, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. They were not here for a noise complaint. They were here for a felony stop. "Federal agents," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Stay where you are." Garrett tried to run. He actually tried to run. He sprinted toward the stern as if he could jump into the water and swim to Mexico, but Vance was faster. He stepped in front of Garrett, blocking his path like a stone wall. Garrett bounced off him and fell backward onto the deck. Officers rushed forward. They grabbed Garrett, hauling him up by his arms. He struggled, kicking and screaming like a child having a tantrum. "Get off me," he yelled. "I am a businessman. This is a mistake. My father-in-law is crazy. He set me up." An officer slammed Garrett against the bulkhead, forcing his hands behind his back. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud and final. "Click, click, click, Garrett Black," the officer said, reading from a card. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and forgery of medical documents. You have the right to remain silent." Garrett twisted his head, looking for someone to blame, looking for a lifeline. He saw Camilla standing by the bar, weeping into her hands. "It was her," Garrett screamed, spitting saliva onto the deck. "It was her idea. She made me do it. She hates her father. She told me to get the money. She forged the papers." The crowd gasped again. Even in his final moment, even when he was caught red-handed, he tried to throw his wife under the bus. He tried to sacrifice the mother of his child to save his own skin. Camilla looked up, her eyes red and swollen. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had chosen over her own father. She saw him for what he was. A coward, a leech, a traitor. "You liar!" Camilla screamed, rushing at him. "I told you to stop. I told you it was too dangerous." Officers held her back. She was not under arrest yet, but she was close. She was an accessory. But tonight the prize was Garrett. I watched them, the happy couple, the partners in crime tearing each other apart, screaming accusations as the police dragged Garrett toward the gangway. Sterling walked up beside me. He lit a cigarette and offered me one. I took it. "Messy business. Family," Sterling said, watching Garrett disappear into the back of a squad car on the pier. "It is not family, Marcus," I said, lighting the cigarette. The smoke tasted clean. "It is just DNA. Family is the people who stay when it snows." I looked at Camilla. She was standing alone on the deck. Guests were gone. Her husband was in cuffs. Her house was seized. She looked at me, waiting for a sign, waiting for me to save her. I took a drag of the cigarette and turned away. "Get her off my ship," I said to Vance. And then I walked into the main salon and poured myself a drink, alone. The red and blue lights of the police cruiser faded into the distance, taking the screaming form of my son-in-law with them, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy and thick with humidity. The party was over. The guests had fled, scattering like roaches when the kitchen light turns on, terrified of being implicated in the disaster. The deck of the Black Pearl, which only an hour ago had been filled with laughter and the clink of crystal glasses, was now a desolate landscape of overturned chairs and spilled wine. And in the center of that wreckage stood Camilla. She was alone, For the first time in her adult life, she had no husband to hide behind, no entourage to impress, and no father to manipulate. She stood by the railing, shivering in the night air, her gold-sequined dress torn at the hem and stained with the red wine her friends had thrown at her. She looked at the empty gangway where Garrett had been dragged away. Then she slowly turned her head to look at me. Her mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks, making her look like a broken doll. I stood by the bar, watching her. Vance and his security team formed a silent wall behind me, ready to remove her by force if necessary. But I waved them off. I wanted to hear this. I wanted to see if there was anything human left inside the shell of vanity she had become. Camilla took a step toward me, her high heels clicking unevenly on the teak deck. She stumbled but caught herself. She looked at me with eyes that were wide and pleading, trying to summon the little girl she used to be, trying to find the frequency that would unlock my heart, Daddy, she whispered, her voice cracking. I did not answer. I just looked at her. I lit a cigar, the flame of the lighter, illuminating the hard lines of my face for a brief second before I snapped it shut. Camilla fell to her knees. It was a dramatic, desperate gesture. She crawled the last few feet across the deck, ruining her expensive dress on the wet wood. She reached out, trying to grab the hem of my trousers, but I took a step back, moving just out of her reach. Daddy, please, she sobbed, looking up at me. I did not know. I swear I did not know how bad it was. Garrett forced me. He said he would hurt me if I did not help him. He is a monster, Daddy. You saw him. You saw how he treated you. I was a victim, too. I took a long drag of the cigar and exhaled the smoke into the night air. It swirled around her head like a gray halo. You were not a victim, Camilla, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. You were a partner. You were the one who told him about my pension. You were the one who forged the medical papers for Leo. You were the one who sat on that bed in the hotel room and laughed about putting me in a state home. She shook, her head frantically, her hair flying around her face. No, I was scared. I was just saying what he wanted to hear, but we are blood. Daddy, we are family. You cannot leave me like this. You cannot let them take everything. I have nowhere to go. She pointed a trembling hand toward the shore. They took the house, Daddy. They took the cars. They froze the accounts. I have nothing. I am your daughter, your flesh and blood. Does that mean nothing to you? She was using the oldest weapon in the world, guilt. She was trying to weaponize biology. She thought that because we shared a genetic code, I was obligated to save her from the hell she had created. I looked at her kneeling there begging for salvation, and my mind drifted back 10 years. It went back to a night in Chicago, a night when the wind was howling and the snow was falling in sheets. Get up, I said. She looked at me, hope flaring in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought I was going to lift her up and hug her and tell her everything would be all right. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her hands on her dress. Thank you, Daddy, she breathed. I knew you would not abandon me. I knew you still loved me. I turned to Vance. Bring it here, I said. Vance stepped out of the shadows. He was holding something in his hand. It was not a checkbook. It was not a set of keys to a new apartment. It was a black, heavy-duty garbage bag. The plastic was shiny under the deck lights. It was cinched tight at the top with a yellow plastic tie. Vance handed the bag to me. It was light, filled with soft things. I held it in my left hand, feeling the crinkle of the plastic. It felt familiar. It felt like a memory made solid. I walked up to Camilla. She looked at the bag, confusion clouding her face. What is this? She asked. I tossed the bag at her feet. It landed with a soft thud, sliding a few inches across the wet deck. 10 years ago, I said, my voice low and steady. You stood in a warm hallway while your husband threw my life into a snowbank. You watched him hand me a garbage bag just like this one. You watched him lock the door. You turned off the porch light so I could not even see my way to the street. Camilla flinched as if I had slapped her. She remembered. She could not deny it. It was snowing. Camilla. I continued, relentless. I was 58 years old. I had a bad back and nowhere to go. I walked 2 miles to the bus station carrying everything I owned in a plastic sack. And do you know what you did while I walked? She shook her head, tears flying. I did not know. She whispered. You drank hot cocoa, I said. I saw you through the window. You sat on the couch. I bought you and you drank cocoa and watched TV. You did not call. You did not check if I froze to death. You erased me. I pointed to the bag at her feet. That is for you. I said. She looked down at it, trembling. What is inside? Your old clothes, I said. The clothes you left at my house when you moved out to marry Garrett. The clothes from before you became this person. I kept them. I do not know why. Maybe I thought the daughter who wore them would come back someday, but she never did. She died in that house in Chicago. I took a step closer, towering over her. You talked about blood, Camila. You talked about family. But blood does not make you family. Loyalty makes you family. Love makes you family. You have neither. Daddy, please, she wailed, dropping to her knees again, clutching the plastic bag as if it were a life raft. I am sorry, I am so sorry, I will change, I will do anything. Just let me stay. Let me stay on the boat. I will work. I will scrub the floors. Just do not send me out there alone. I looked at the shore. The marina was dark now. The party lights were off. The police were gone. It was just a long concrete pier leading to a dark parking lot. You are not staying on my boat, I said. You are not staying in my properties. You are going to do exactly what I did. You are going to walk. I signaled to Vance, escort her off the ship. I ordered Vance and another guard stepped forward. They took Camilla by the arms, lifting her to her feet. She screamed and kicked, fighting them, but they were professionals. They marched her across the deck toward the gangway. Daddy, she screamed, looking back over her shoulder. Don't do this. I am your daughter. I am your little girl. I turned my back on her. I walked to the railing and looked out at the ocean. I heard her heels dragging on the wood. I heard her screams fading as they carried her down the ramp onto the concrete pier. I heard the sound of the security gate clanging shut, locking her out. I stood there for a long time, gripping the cold metal of the railing. My heart was not racing. It was beating slow and heavy. It hurt. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. But it was the pain of a surgeon cutting out gangrene. It was necessary pain. I heard the engines of the Black Pearl rumble to life deep within the hull. The deck vibrated beneath my feet. The crew was preparing to cast off. I walked to the stern of the boat, the back railing overlooking the pier. I looked down. Camilla was standing there. She was a small, golden figure under the harsh yellow light of a street lamp. She was clutching the black garbage bag to her chest. She looked tiny. She looked lost. She saw me looking down at her. She ran to the edge of the pier, waving her hand. Dad, she shouted, her voice thin over the distance. Dad, wait. I have no money. My phone is dead. Dad, please. I have nowhere to go. I looked at her standing in the parking lot of a luxury marina, surrounded by yachts she could not touch, wearing a ruined dress and holding a bag of old clothes. It was poetic. It was tragedy. She had no car. It had been towed. She had no money. Her accounts were frozen. She had no husband. He was in a holding cell, and she had no father. He was standing on a $15 million yacht looking down at her. The gap between the boat and the pier began to widen. The Black Pearl was moving, pulling away from the dock. The water churned white at the stern. Camila ran along the pier, following the boat until she reached the end. She stood at the very edge, her toes over the concrete, looking across the widening black water. Dad, she screamed one last time. A sound of pure desperation. I did not wave. I did not speak. I just watched her get smaller and smaller as we moved out into the harbor. I watched until she was just a speck of gold in the darkness. I watched until the darkness swallowed her whole. I was leaving her exactly where she had left me, in the cold, in the dark, with nothing but a bag of clothes and the consequences of her choices. The yacht turned, heading for the open ocean. The wind picked up, blowing the salt spray into my face. It tasted like tears, but I was not crying. I was done crying. I took the cigar from my mouth and flicked it over the railing. It tumbled down, a sparking ember falling into the black wake. It hissed as it hit the water and vanished. Goodbye. Camila, I whispered to the wind. I turned and walked into the warmth of the main cabin. I had a grandson to save, and I had an empire to run, the dead. Weight was gone. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt light. I stood on the edge of the green field in Vermont, breathing in the clean mountain air that smelled of pine and damp earth. It was a world away from the humidity of Florida and the stench of betrayal. The elite soccer camp was exactly the kind of place Garrett would send a child to show off manicured lawns, state-of-the-art facilities, and parents driving cars that cost more than houses. But I was not here to show off. I was here to salvage the only thing worth saving from the wreckage of my family, my grandson, Leo. I saw him before he saw me. He was smaller than the other boys, wearing a green jersey that hung loose on his frame. He was kicking a ball against a wall by himself, his face set in a scowl of concentration. He looked lonely. He looked like I did at that age. Before the docks hardened me, I walked across the grass, Vance flanking me, a discreet shadow holding the emergency custody paperwork signed by a judge who had seen the evidence of Garrett's crimes. Leo Washer called out softly. The boy stopped kicking. He turned around. His eyes widened when he saw me. They were Camila's eyes, dark and expressive, but there was no recognition in them, only fear. He took a step back, clutching the ball to his chest like a shield. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I am Cedric," I said, kneeling down on the grass, so I was not towering over him. "I am your grandfather." Leo shook his head violently. "No, you are not. My mom told me about you. She said, you are the bad man. She said you are the devil who stole our house and put Daddy in jail." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. It was the final poison Camila had injected into his veins. She had turned me into a monster in his mind before we had even met. She had weaponized his innocence to protect her lies. I did not get angry. I did not yell. I just stayed on my knees, completely still. "I am not a devil," Leo the First said calmly. "I am just a man, and I did not steal your house. Your father lost it because he made bad choices, and he is in jail because he broke the law." Leo's lip quivered. "I want my mom," he whispered. "I know, son," I said, "and I am sorry that she cannot be here right now, but she is. She is having a hard time, and until she gets better, you are going to stay with me." "I am not going with you," he shouted, looking around for a counselor, looking for an escape. "You are going to hurt me," Mom said. "You hate us." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo Camila had given me, the one of him on the swing set. It was crumpled now, worn from being in my wallet next to Viola's picture. "I do not hate you, Leo," I said, holding out the photo. "Your grandmother, Viola, my wife. She used to say that hate is a fire that burns down the house you live in. I do not hate anyone, but I do protect my family. And you are my family." Leo looked at the photo. He looked at my hand, rough and scarred. He looked at my eyes. He was looking for the monster his mother had described, but he did not find one. He found a tired old man with tears in his eyes. I stood up slowly. Vance stepped forward and spoke to the camp counselors, showing them the court order, showing them the badges. They nodded, looking at me with respect, looking at Leo with pity. They packed his bags. They walked him to my car. The drive back was silent. Leo sat in the back seat, staring out the window, gripping his soccer ball. I did not try to buy his affection with ice cream or toys. I did not try to force a conversation. I just let him be. I let him feel safe. Silence was better than lies. And as we drove south toward the coast, I made a promise to myself I would not spoil this boy. I would not give him the world on a silver platter like I had done for his mother. I would give him something better. I would give him the truth. The family court hearing took place 2 weeks later inside a building made of gray stone and fluorescent lights. It was a place where dreams went to die and where broken families were dissected by strangers. I sat at the plaintiff's table. Dr. Montgomery beside me, calm and confident. Leo was not there. I had left him with a private tutor at a secure estate far away from this ugliness. The doors opened, and Camila walked in. Barely recognized her. The gold-sequined dress was gone, replaced by a cheap gray pantsuit that did not fit. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face was gaunt, free of makeup, stripped of the arrogance that had defined her. She looked like a ghost. She looked like the woman she would have been if I had never paid for her college, never bought her cars, never cushioned her falls. She did not look at me. She stared at the table, her hands clasping and unclasping nervously. She was alone. Garrett was in a federal detention center awaiting trial, denied bail because he was a flight risk. Camilla had a public defender, a young woman who looked overworked and tired. The judge, a woman with stern eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, reviewed the case file. The silence in the room was heavy. "Mr. Thornton," the judge said, looking at me, "you are petitioning for full legal custody of the minor, Leo Black, citing the parents' inability to provide a stable home and their involvement in criminal activities. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. The judge turned to Camilla. "Ms. Black, you are currently unemployed, homeless, and facing potential charges as an accessory to fraud. Do you have any means to support this child?" Camilla stood up. Her legs were shaking. I could hear her breathing from across the aisle. "Your Honor," she said, her voice thin and reedy, "he is my son. I love him. My father. He is doing this out of spite. He has millions. He kicked me out. He has a yacht and I am sleeping in a shelter. He stole my husband's future." She was still doing it. She was still playing the victim. She still did not understand that her situation was the result of her actions, not my malice. The judge lowered her glasses. "Ms. Black, the court is not interested in your family drama. The court is interested in the welfare of the child. You are living in a shelter. You have zero income. Your husband is facing 20 years in prison. Your father is offering a stable home, private education, and medical care. This is not a difficult decision, but he is evil," Camilla screamed, losing her composure, tears streaming down her face. "He will turn Leo against me. He will buy him." "He does not have to buy him," the judge snapped. "He just has to feed him and keep him safe, which is more than you have done." The gavel banged down. It sounded like a gunshot. "Custody is awarded to the grandfather, Cedric Thornton. The mother is granted supervised visitation once a month pending a psychological evaluation and proof of stable housing." Case closed. Camilla collapsed into her chair, sobbing loudly. It was a sound of total defeat. I looked at her and felt a pang of sorrow deep in my chest. She was my daughter. I had held her when she was a baby. I had wanted the world for her, but she was toxic, and I could not let her poison Leo. I stood up and walked out of the courtroom. I did not look back. I did not offer to pay for her lawyer or buy her lunch. I let her sit in the wreckage she had created. It was the only way she would ever learn, if she ever learned. We flew back to the Black Pearl that afternoon. Leo had never been on a plane before, let alone a private jet. He sat with his nose pressed against the window, watching the clouds. He did not ask for headphones or an iPad. He just watched the world. When we arrived at the marina, the yacht was waiting. It was not set up for a party this time. There were no champagne fountains, no influencers, no loud music. It was just a ship, a vessel designed to navigate the ocean. I walked Leo up the gangway. He looked around, his eyes wide, taking in the teak decks, the polished chrome, the sheer size of it. "Is this yours, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. I looked at the ship. It was a symbol of my success, yes, but it was also just a thing. It was wood and steel and fiberglass. "It is mine, Leo," I said, "but it is not a toy. It is a responsibility." I took him to the engine room. I showed him the massive diesels that powered the vessel. I introduced him to the mechanics, the men with grease under their fingernails, the men who kept the heart of the ship beating. These men work hard. "Leo," I told him, "they are the reason we can move. They are not servants. They are experts. You will treat them with respect. You will say, 'Please' and 'Thank you,' and you will learn their names." Leo nodded, solemn and serious. "Yes, Grandpa." The next morning, I woke him up at dawn. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, turning the water pink and gold. I did not give him a video game. I handed him a bucket and a brush. "What is this for?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "The deck has salt on it," I said. "Salt eats the wood. We have to scrub it down, but—" "Aren't there people for that?" he asked, looking at the crew members who were already working. "There are," I said, "but this is my ship, and if you want to ride on it, you have to earn your keep. Work comes before play. Leo, that is the rule." I thought he might throw a tantrum. I thought he might cry for his mother. But he didn't. He looked at me. Then he looked at the bucket. He picked it up. "Okay, Grandpa," he said. We spent the next 2 hours scrubbing the deck side by side. My knees hurt and my back ached, but I did not stop, and neither did he. We worked until the sun was high and sweat was running down our faces. When we were done, the deck shone. I went to the galley and made us sandwiches, ham and cheese, simple food. We sat on the clean deck eating our lunch, looking out at the open ocean. My hands hurt, Leo said, looking at his small palms, which were red from the brush. That is a good hurt, I said. That is the feeling of doing something real. It is the feeling of owning your day. Leo took a bite of his sandwich. He looked at me, chewing thoughtfully. Grandpa, he said. Yes. Leo, Mom said you were mean. Mom said you didn't love us. I put my sandwich down. I looked at him. I looked at the boy who was my second chance. Your mom was lost, Leo, I said. She forgot what was important. She thought love was about buying things. She thought happiness was a big house. I tried to teach her, but I failed. I gave her too much too soon. I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. I am not going to fail you, I said. I am going to be tough on you, Leo. I am going to make you work. I am going to make you learn, but I will never lie to you, and I will never leave you behind. Do you understand? Leo nodded. He leaned into my hand just a little. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a victory. I understand, Grandpa, he said. We finished our lunch in silence. The yacht cut through the water, heading for new horizons. Behind us, the city and the courtrooms and the jail cells faded into the distance. Ahead, there was only the ocean and the future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was steering the ship in the right direction. I had lost a daughter, but I had found a son, and this time I was going to raise him. Right, the sound of the gavel hitting the wood block was not loud, but it rang with the finality of a coffin lid slamming shut. Garrett stood in the federal courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds in detention. His arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell of a man. The judge looked down at him over wire-rimmed spectacles, displaying zero sympathy for a man who had defrauded banks and attempted to destroy his own family. 15 years in federal prison, the judge announced. 15 years with no possibility of parole until 85% of the sentence was served. Garrett did not scream, he did not fight, he just slumped forward, his forehead touching the defense table, and wept. It was the sound of a man realizing that his youth, his ambition, and his freedom were gone, eaten by his own greed. As the marshals led him away, the chains on his ankles rattled, a music of justice that sounded sweeter than any symphony. Camilla was not in the courtroom. She did not come to see her husband sentenced. She was too busy trying to survive. The judge in her own case had been lenient, but the world had not. She had no skills, no references, and a last name that was now synonymous with fraud. She lived in a studio apartment that smelled of mildew, miles away from the luxury she had felt entitled to. Every morning at 4 o'clock, she put on a gray uniform with a name tag that just said, Camilla. She took a bus to the industrial district, to the massive distribution center that dominated the skyline. She pushed a mop bucket across miles of concrete floors, cleaning up spills, emptying trash cans, scrubbing toilets used by truck drivers. She did not look the workers in the eye. She kept her head down, terrified that someone might recognize the woman from the viral videos. But the true irony, the cosmic joke that she would never understand, was written on the side of the building she entered every day. The sign above the loading dock read, Thornton Logistics. She was scrubbing the floors of my empire, earning minimum wage in the kingdom she could have inherited, and she did not even know it. I had given strict orders to the HR department. She was to be treated like any other employee. No favors, no harassment. Just the invisible labor she had once despised. It was not cruelty, it was education. She was finally learning the value of $1 the hard way. With the toxicity purged from my life, I turned my attention to building something that would outlast me. I sat in the boardroom of Thornton Logistics, the glass walls overlooking the harbor where the Black Pearl was docked. Dr. Montgomery sat across from me, a stack of legal documents between us. These were not lawsuits or restraining orders. They were the blueprints for the future. I picked up my pen, a heavy fountain pen that Viola had given me 30 years ago. This is the final draft, Montgomery asked. It is, I said, it establishes the Viola Foundation, named after my wife, the woman who taught me that kindness is a strength, not a weakness. We are endowing it with $50 million. Its mission is simple: to provide legal aid, housing, and protection for elderly people who are being financially or emotionally abused by their families. No one should have to sleep on a park bench because their children are greedy. No one should have to fear their own blood. I signed the papers, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The money that Garrett and Camila had tried to steal would now be used to destroy people like them. It was the perfect circle. Then we moved to the second document, the trust. It was for Leo. But it was not a blank check. I had seen what easy money did to Camila. I would not let it happen to her son. The terms are clear, I said to Montgomery. The trust is locked until he turns 25. Until then, his tuition is paid and his medical needs are covered, but his living expenses are his own responsibility. He has to work. He has to maintain a job. He has to understand that wealth is a tool, not a personality trait. If he fails to meet these criteria, the money goes to the foundation. Montgomery nodded, looking at the document with approval. It is a wise plan. Cedric, you are giving him a safety net, not a hammock. I looked at the signature line, Leo Thornton. The boy had taken my name. He had asked to do it a month ago. He said he did not want to be a black anymore. He wanted to be like his grandpa. I had cried when he asked, tears of pure joy. I signed the trust, sealing his future, protecting him from the hunger that had consumed his parents. It is done, I said, closing the folder. The empire was safe. The legacy was secure. And for the first time, I felt that I could truly rest. Not the rest of the grave that Garrett had planned for me, but the rest of a man who has finished his work, the Florida. Sun was dipping below the horizon, turning the sky into a canvas of bruised purple and burning gold. The air was cooling, but the humidity still clung to the skin, reminding us that we were alive. I sat on the aft deck of the Black Pearl in my favorite chair, a fishing rod in my hand. Next to me, in a smaller chair, sat Leo. He was wearing a hat that was slightly too big for him and holding his own rod with a focus that made me smile. We had been sitting there for an hour in comfortable silence. The engine of the yacht was off. The only sounds were the slap of water against the hull and the distant cry of seagulls. It was peaceful. It was the kind of peace I had dreamed of during those long, cold nights in the shelter 10 years ago, Grandpa Leo said. Breaking the silence, his eyes fixed on the bobber floating in the water. Yes, Leo. Do you think they miss us? He asked. He did not have to say their names. I knew who he meant. Parents leave a hole even when they are bad parents. It is a wound that takes a lifetime to scar over. I thought about Garrett in his cell staring at concrete walls. I thought about Camila pushing a mop bucket in a warehouse, yearning for a life she threw away. I think they miss what we gave them. Leo, I said gently, I think they miss the comfort, but I do not think they know how to miss us. Not really. To miss a person, you have to see them. And they never saw us. They only saw mirrors reflecting what they wanted. Leo nodded slowly. He seemed to understand. He was growing up fast, too fast perhaps, but he was growing up strong. He was not soft like his father. He had grit. My bobber dipped below the surface, a tug on the line. I reeled it in slowly, feeling the resistance. It was a fight, but a fair one. I pulled a silver fish from the water, its scales flashing in the dying light. Look at that, I said, unhooking the fish. It was small, barely legal size. Leo looked at it. Should we keep it, Grandpa? I looked at the fish, struggling in my hand, fighting for its life. It wanted to live. It wanted it to swim. I looked at the ocean, vast and deep and free. No, I said, tossing the fish back into the water. Let it go. We have enough. We watched the fish dart away into the depths, disappearing into the black water. I put my rod down and looked at my grandson, the last of my blood, the hope of my line. I love you, Leo, I said. He looked up at me, his smile genuine and bright, reflecting the sunset. I love you too, Grandpa. We sat there as the stars came out one by one, witnessing the quiet victory of survival. I had lost a daughter, but I had saved a soul. And as the Black Pearl rocked gently on the tide, I knew that Viola was watching us, smiling. I was Cedric Thornton, the silent tycoon. And my revenge was not destruction. My revenge was this peace. My revenge was living well and raising a boy who would be a better man than his father ever was. The past was dead. Long live the future. My journey taught me a brutal but necessary truth. Family is defined by loyalty, not DNA. For a decade, I allowed my silence to be mistaken for weakness, hoping my daughter would eventually see me as a father, not a resource. She never did. I learned that you cannot buy respect, and you certainly cannot save people who are determined to drown in their own greed. True wealth isn't the yacht or the empire. It is the peace that comes from removing toxic people from your life. By cutting the dead weight, I didn't just save my fortune. I saved my grandson's future and reclaimed my own soul. If you have ever had to make the hard choice to cut off a toxic family member to protect your peace, let me know your story in the comments below.